Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Commonwealth Transportation Board May meeting here in Northern Virginia. My name is Nick Donahue, the Secretary of Transportation. I'm going to call today's meeting to order, and we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And just, convene the action meeting and then resuspend it to complete any kind of workshop items at that time. But I just wanted to make sure members of the public understood kind of the cadence of this meeting, because it's a little different than some of the other ones.
I just welcoming you all to Northern Virginia District. Thank you for taking the time and effort to come to this beautiful part of the Commonwealth. I am not going to go into the benefits of this district and the dynamism and the economy that's here, because we have other speakers that do that. But I do just want to be very brief and thank everyone for joining us and thanking those who helped put this all together. My daughter actually helped arrange Abigail helped arrange the hotel and the restaurants that we'll be staying at. Mayor Gaskins and the Visit Alexandria was incredibly helpful in coordinating logistics and all that, and particularly Gabriela Garcia. Also want to thank Bill Cutler and Kim McCool from here in the district that will be guiding us through the various tours we're going to have and just helping manage logistics here on the ground. So welcome, and I'll pass it back to you, Mr. Secretary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Gribben. And next, I'd like to welcome Arlington County Chair Matt DeFronte to the podium.
Good morning. Welcome. I'm Arlington County's chair. We call it the county board. We haven't gotten the right hang of Board of Supervisors, as many of you may know us, that sort of a role. Thank you to Mr. Secretary and members of the board as a whole, and to the state, regional, and local transportation partners. I want to thank DJ for his leadership on behalf of our region, and also Randy Menchu, who's been a longtime leader, as well as Bill Cutler and the VDOT team for helping to coordinate the visit. We're grateful you're spending time here. I've gotten to play some roles on transportation that I've been honored to engage with. The Northern Virginia Transportation Commission is one of those that I chaired. Northern Virginia is a critical region for the Commonwealth, and I'm not sure that in our history we have, as a region, we want to deeply embrace the Commonwealth. Because we will not continue to prosper in the shifting environment that we're in without the whole state. Transportation is not just about roads, rails, bridges, buses, trails, or stations. It's about people. And it certainly was as I was working to get here just before 9 o'clock this morning after dropping off my daughter. I have 2 young children, and I don't know what it will be like 20, 30, 40 years from now for them, as far as how they get to the places that they work and hopefully raise a family. There's a traveler trying to reach the airport for whom it's critical to get there quickly and efficiently. And there's a resident, and there are many residents in different parts of the Commonwealth who are walking, biking, or taking transit in the buses. We certainly saw through COVID that so many of the heroes in our community we're taking bus and metro, and I'm thrilled that Metro has made so much progress. That's why this board matters so much. This region is one of the most economically important regions, and perhaps you may be tired of hearing, but it is the case that we, and I personally, take a lot of pride in sending money from Northern Virginia as an economic engine through to the rest of the state. I have in my life seen rural parts of Texas and Iowa, and I know that economic opportunity waxes and wanes in every community, including Arlington, but certainly also South Side on the outskirts of Bristol and across the Commonwealth. When transportation works, it supports opportunity across the Commonwealth. When we work here, it helps our economy grow. You've seen the economic analysis. So the work before you is practical, it's critical. You will hear from partners, NVTA, NVTC, and I'm doing an impersonation of the mayor of Alexandria. We have a friendly rivalry that I think Arlington has just a little bit more to offer. There are complex topics that you're engaging with. They involve funding and engineering, coordination, land use equity, safety, and long-term planning. The center of it all is how do we help people? The question is what Arlington thinks about every day. We have more Metro rail stops than almost anywhere. I want to be efficient, but I want to emphasize how critical transportation is to our economy. The system only works when we all work well together in Arlington, and it certainly is true in the Commonwealth. Partnership is critical to all of this. We're looking forward to seeing many of you this afternoon at one of the projects that the Secretary wisely gave you a little discretion, but it's important to shape public input, to hear and engage. And it's not just one mode, it's not just one project, it's not just one road, it's not just one train, it's all of us. So on behalf of my colleagues on the county board, I hope you don't mind my extra half minute or minute. I'll leave you to your meeting. We are deeply honored to host you in this region, and we are deeply committed to the Commonwealth that I know you all are committed to. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, I'd like to bring up the Northern Virginia District Engineer, Mr. Cutler, who I think has a few remarks and a video. And
Thank
then
you.
we'll move into the agenda.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Secretary, Commissioner, Director, members of the CTB. Thank you so much, and welcome to Northern Virginia. We're so pleased to have you all here. My team and I work hard for the 2.5 million residents of Northern Virginia, a population that is greater than that of 15 different states. It also represents roughly 30% of the Commonwealth's population. The Northern Virginia Chamber of Commerce describes us as having almost 40% of all the jobs in Virginia, here in Northern Virginia. And then our economy, obviously pretty robust in terms of the revenue. So our team recognizes the importance of the work we do in keeping the economy open, providing opportunities, improving quality of life. And with that, I have a short video. Welcome to VDOT's dynamic Northern Virginia district, home to 2.5 million people living in the Virginia suburbs of our nation's capital. Our district includes 4 counties, Arlington, Fairfax, Loudoun, and Prince William, as well as 5 cities and 14 towns. We are VDOT's smallest geographic district, yet we have the highest population and are the largest job center, fueling an economy that is vital to the Commonwealth. We border Washington, D.C., Maryland, and West Virginia, and VDOT's Culpeper, Fredericksburg, and Stanton districts. Our Metropolitan Planning Organization is the Transportation Planning Board of the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. We coordinate closely with Maryland and the District of Columbia on the bridges that connect us, including the American Legion, Teddy Roosevelt, 14th Street, and Woodrow Wilson bridges, among others. We are a member of MATOC, the Metropolitan Area Transportation Operations Coordination Program, a regional traffic operations center for the National Capital Region. Within our district, we monitor and manage our highways and signals 24 hours a day in the McConnell Public Safety and Transportation Operations Center, a world-class facility operated in partnership with Fairfax County. Here, staff from VDOT, Virginia State Police, and Fairfax County's Police Department, Fire and Rescue Department, Department of Public Safety Communications, and Department of Emergency Management and Security work side by side to identify, monitor, and resolve major traffic issues, planned or unplanned. This includes our Traffic Operations Engineering team, who is responsible for 50% of the state's traffic signals. Through public-private partnerships, we have created one of the world's most sophisticated networks of managed lanes. 97 miles of managed express lanes on our interstate highways provide mobility choices and reliable travel times for those who choose to use them. They are a conveyance system for express buses and carpools, as we focus on moving people, not just moving vehicles. In 2025, we opened the northern extension of the Capital Beltway's 495 express lanes, and Virginia continues to partner with Maryland and their local counties to develop future projects that will benefit our region. Our express lane system provides many benefits for transit users, including new bus routes, a major new transit center, and additional park and ride assets, as well as annual payments that support transit interests that are selected by the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission and the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority. We know the importance of transit in our region, which is why we work to support the 32 Metro Rail stations located in Northern Virginia. First and last mile segments of transit trips are vital, so our support extends to projects that expand access to these stations by road, bus, sidewalk, and bike trail. We are helping to develop an expansive new bus rapid transit system, or BRT, with our partners at Fairfax County along the Richmond Highway corridor between Huntington and Fort Belvoir. We also support rail stations for Amtrak and the Virginia Railway Express. We are providing crucial support for Virginia's Long Bridge Rail project across the Potomac River by making right-of-way available for construction support activities. The project will relieve one of the biggest rail bottlenecks on the East Coast by constructing 5 new rail bridges and 2 new pedestrian bicycle bridges to enable more frequent passenger rail service while investing billions of dollars in the regional economy. We are home to Virginia's largest airports, Dulles International Airport in Loudoun and Fairfax counties, and Reagan National Airport in Arlington County, as well as Virginia's busiest general aviation airports, Manassas Regional and Leesburg Executive. Our roadway improvements help passenger and freight traffic around these airport properties. Since transportation is not simply limited to roads, working with our local and regional partners, we have helped develop Virginia's most comprehensive bike and trail network that improves accessibility, provides transportation choices, and are used for commuting and recreation. Each spring, VDOT sponsors and participates in Bike to Work Day, staffing and visiting some of the 100 pit stops to engage with fellow bicycle advocates. VDOT has a seat on the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, where we partner with local governments in the selection of multimodal projects and the distribution of NVTA funds that are collected here and stay here. These important funds are a supplement to Northern Virginia's allocation of statewide funding. In Northern Virginia District, we maintain over 2,300 bridges and 17,000 roads. We are home to the 3 largest public school systems in the Commonwealth, and those students and parents count on us to keep roadways and trails open. The Fairfax County school bus fleet is the largest in the nation, and together with the other school systems in our district, is able to safely transport hundreds of thousands of school children due to VDOT's commitment to roadway safety. Our residents speak more than 194 languages, and our VDOT district staff speak 52 of them, making us representative of our diverse community. Every day, we live our responsibility to our community. No one else does what we do. We work hard to plan, design, construct, maintain, operate, and support a multimodal network to provide accessibility for everyone. We keep Northern Virginia moving. We are VDOT.
Thank you. Learn more about some of the projects in this autographed version of our Ms. Sellers has a personal autograph. But I really want to thank our team. I'm joined here in the room today by our Assistant District Administrator for Communications, Ellen Kamalakis, and our Assistant District Administrator for Planning and Fund Management, Kim McCool. But many others that help us deliver and maintain and operate this tremendous network. And also today you'll be hearing from our partners across the region, both this morning and later this afternoon on the tour. None of this can be done without those important partnerships. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Cutler. All right, with that, folks, we're going to move into the agenda. The first item we have today is an update from Monica Backman, the Executive Director of the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority. Ms. Backman?
Good morning. I'm Monica Backman, the CEO of the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority. Thank you for having me here with you this morning. I know I need to be brief, but I did want to say a few words about what NVTA is and what we do. So NVTA, we were created in 2002, and no one really cares about that because we did not have funding until 2013. In 2013, the Virginia General Assembly passed House Bill 2313. House Bill 2313 gave NVTA dedicated revenues, which were divided into 2 different funding categories. 70% goes to NVTA for regional congestion-reducing transportation projects, which are multimodal, and we do a qualitative and quantitative assessment and funding, and then 30% goes back to the 9 localities Bill referenced in the video where the taxes and fees are raised. Our primary responsibilities is to update the region's long-range transportation plan. That is critical because the law says we can only fund with our 70% projects that are in the region's long-range transportation plan. That plan is needs-based, it's fiscally and geographically unconstrained. So you will see projects in that plan that are in the District of Columbia, that are in Maryland, and of course in Northern Virginia. What we are currently doing is updating the long-range transportation plan. We update it every 5 years. The current plan was adopted by the by the authority in December of 2022. On the programming side, we do 6-year programs with projects that are in our long-range transportation plan. Now, it has to be the current plan. People have asked me that. Can I go back? My project was in the one before. No, it has to be in the current plan. We update our 6-year program every 2 years. We are currently going through an update now. We received a request for 27 projects totaling $1.3 billion. What I tell everyone, we don't have $1.3 billion. So, what we have done to date since the passage of HB 2313, nearly $5 billion invested in multimodal transportation solutions. If you look at the graphic, you see we fund buses, rail, bike ped projects, intersections, roadway, technology, park and ride lots. We are truly multimodal because we know that there is no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to solving congestion in Northern Virginia. But what does that $5 billion mean? It means 500 million hours of travel time saved throughout the region. 43,000 new jobs created, and this is all by 2034. We did not do this work in-house, so it's not us playing with the numbers. We actually contracted with an economy firm to do this work. It means $7.5 billion boost to the economy. So the jobs that stay here, the investments that we make also boost the economy, and $8 billion in monetary savings. That's direct savings. The picture's worth 1,000 words. We try to be all over showing citizens what their tax dollars do for them. Oftentimes we hear what's going on because citizens do not see the work that's being done behind the scenes. But what they do see is groundbreakings and ribbon cuttings. And we try to make sure we are conveying that message that we are doing the work for the people. Investing in regional multimodal solutions. Again, we're multimodal. We have invested in VRE projects, one of them being the Franconia-Springfield bypass that started off with the DRPT application and is now under the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority. New metro stations, Innovation Center in Potomac Yard. We're currently investing in 5 different bus rapid transit routes and, of course, roadway improvements. So what does that mean? We like to talk about collaboration and partnerships. We know that you have, as the Commonwealth Transportation Board, corridors of statewide significance. We invest in corridors of statewide significance. We have 12 projects in the North-South corridor, totaling $420 million, 28 in the Northern Virginia corridor, $645 million, 20 projects in the Seminole corridor, $370 million, and 35 in the Washington to North Carolina corridor. That's $1.4 billion. Also, on the veins of partnership, you've entrusted to us the programming autonomy of CMAQ and RSTP projects. So over the past 15 years, NVTA has recommended, and you as the CTB has adopted, more than 150 multimodal projects totaling $1.5 billion from CMAQ and RSTP alone. I'm not going to read the list, but I did provide a sample of the subset of projects so you can see where that money is going. But also under the veins of collaboration and partnership, you have responsibility for smart scale. We try to make sure that we are investing in projects as well. So we have 16 projects that we funded that also have smart scale money. Now this isn't an over like, oh, you're funding PE, we're funding PE. No, we try to make sure that the phases that we're funding are different to keep these projects moving. Smart Scale for these 16 projects has committed $500 million, and for the same projects, we have $1 billion on it. Our goal is to make sure that these projects are advancing so citizens can see reduced congestion. So the way forward, planning for the future. Based on our models and our numbers, Northern Virginia's growth by 2045, 320,000 new jobs and 440,000 new people. They have to go somewhere, they have to be able to move. So NVTA and our partners, we're connecting people by delivering multimodal projects that make traffic safer and more efficient. Again, we invest in all modes, and I have to say this, we do not invest in air travel because the money has to benefit the citizens who pay into the funding categories. But we partner with the CTB, our partner agency, some you will hear from this afternoon, and getting this work done. The other thing, before I go on to the BRT network, VDOT is currently delivering $1 billion of those 70% projects. So $1 billion are being delivered by the Northern Virginia District Office. We have a great relationship. So one thing we're working on now is our BRT action plan. This action plan outlines up to 28 routes to expand connectivity, not only in Northern Virginia, but across the DMV. Why is that important? As a user, you do not want to be restricted by boundary lines, whether it's a city, town, county. You want to be able to go where you want to go seamlessly and reliably. So some of the projects you will see that we're currently underway, and it's ironic that we're in Alexandria this morning because 2 of those BRT projects are right here in Alexandria. That's the Duke Street Transitway and the West End Transitway. Collaboration. I want to leave you with this slide because we don't do it alone. We work with you. We work with the localities. We work with the agencies. You will see we have Metro here. We have Montgomery County, Prince George's County, DDOT, because we as a region understand in order to be efficient, effective, reducing congestion, again, we fund all modes except air travel, and we want to make sure that we're working collaboratively with our agencies and partners. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Ms. Backman. And before we turn to questions, I just want to thank you and your whole team, as well as your board, for the partnership that we have with the authority. They've been a critical partner on a number of high priority projects. And just to think back to, I think the first one you and I worked on together, which some of you may use this morning, but the I-66 outside the Beltway project, the Commonwealth was only actually able to move forward with that project at that time due to a partnership with NVTA when we thought that project was going to require up to $600 million in public funding, and the state at that time didn't have it. And so we worked collaboratively then, as we still do now, where they decided to put up half the money and we put up half the money. When we didn't need that money, obviously, nobody spent their money, but we also then partnered with the region to, because they were willing to put those funds in up front. We partnered with them on identifying how the concession payment we received on that project would be used for projects kind of in this region again. So a long history of collaboration with the authority. As Ms. Backman noted, they provide a healthy amount of funding to projects in this region. I think overall, do you all raise about $400 million a year, give or take?
Yes, give or take.
Yeah. Not precise, but in the ballpark there. And so again, a real supplement to meet some of the needs in this region. And so with that, I'd be happy to see if there's any questions from Ms. Backman or comments. Mr. Grimm?
Just have one comment. That was a fantastic presentation. This is a really complicated region of the Commonwealth, and you nailed it in just a few minutes. So
thank you. And I do want to acknowledge, of course, Mr. Secretary, we have a long history of working together. Ms. Zimmerman is on the authority, as is Mr. Gribben, and we appreciate their participation and collaboration. And Mr. Minshew was on the authority when he was a member of the House of Delegates and always has been a partner, as well as Mr. Bridge. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Backman. Folks, we are going to slightly modify the agenda as the presenter of number 2 is on 95 waiting to arrive here, but I am sure they will be here shortly. And so we're actually going to jump to item number 3. So if Ms. Hussein with DRPT could come up, and I appreciate everyone's flexibility. Doesn't go to Richmond.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Sarah Hussein, and I am the Director of Northern Virginia Transit Programs at DRPT. I'm based here in our Northern Virginia office, a mile away in Old Town Alexandria. I'm going to provide some context, an introduction to toll-funded transit service here in the Commonwealth. Here's a high-level agenda. First, I'll run through the various toll revenue-funded transit service here in Virginia and the governance structure on how those funds are awarded and used. The next 2 items really belong to Kate Mattice, so they're just here queuing her up for the next presentation. She's here to talk about the successes of the Commuter Choice Program here in Northern Virginia. This pie chart came to the CTB last month as part of the FY27 six-year improvement program for DRPT. It shows the full picture of how transit is funded here in the Commonwealth, the wide range of sources that support transit. My focus today is on that green square, the toll revenues, 4%, $46.5 million in FY27. This is a map of the 4 toll revenue funded transit grant programs here in Northern Virginia. I'll run through these kind of quickly, and then I have a table next slide that kind of show a little bit more detail. The first and oldest program is the I-395 Commuter Choice Program. This program is administered by NVTC, and it runs on the express lanes between Spotsylvania County up to Arlington. The next 2 programs are on the I-66 corridor. The Beltway, or 495, splits this corridor into 2 different segments. I-66 inside the Beltway is administered by NVTC through their Commuter Choice Program from the Beltway into DC, essentially. The 66 corridor from the Beltway out to Haymarket is the I-66 outside the Beltway program, and that's administered by DRPT. The newest program is the I-495 Next Express lanes that were in the VDOT video that operate on the 495 extension from Tyson's up to the American Legion Bridge. This table has the same 4 toll revenue grant programs, just in table format, essentially. There are some similarities, some differences. I'm not going to run through the entire table, but I will highlight a few differences amongst the group. Each grant program is administered by a different memorandum of agreement, or MOA, and you can see the parties to the MOA on here. The bolded parties are the ones that are responsible for the administration. So parties to various MOAs include NVTC, PRTC, CTB, VDOT, and DRPT, all the acronyms. As a reminder, NVTC, Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, PRTC, Potomac and Rappahannock Transportation Commission. You all know what CTB stands for, and you're also familiar with VDOT and DRPT. Most of the concessionaires, the companies that are providing the toll revenues, are private, with the exception of VDOT. VDOT operates the toll lanes on I-66 inside the Beltway. And then we have over here in the funding amounts, the nominal dollar amounts, along with the MOA end dates. And so the point here is it's a lot of money over in agreements that last decades. The NVTC Commuter Choice Program is run on every 2-year cycle. The DRPT, we run an annual grant cycle. One important thing to note is that the use of these toll revenues is geographically restricted. So the benefits from the tolls on these corridors must benefit the toll-paying users. So we can't use I-66 commuter funds in Richmond, for example. It's an important distinction.
Well, and Mr. Hussain, if I could jump
Yes.
in. It's not a distinction in the memorandum of agreement.
Correct.
It is a distinction of law. And so there was a court case in 2013 in Virginia, the Meeks case, that was related to the downtown and midtown tunnel. And for a toll to be considered a user fee and not a tax, it must be used for the benefit of that corridor. And so I want to be very clear, when we say that it is a restriction, it is not a restriction that even if we are a party to the MOA, we could choose to change. That is not how that works. If we were to use toll revenues in a way that did not benefit the corridor, that would be considered a tax, and that would need to be imposed by the General Assembly, because only the General Assembly or a local body, when the General Assembly has given them permission, can impose a tax. However, this body and the commissioner do have authority to impose user fees. So I just want to be very clear about that distinction and the fact that that is not in the agreement, that is in law.
Thank you. I'm going to get in a little more detail now about the I-66 corridor. As a reminder, there's inside the Beltway, which runs from 495 over to Arlington, and then outside the Beltway, which is from the Beltway out westward out to Haymarket. The I-66 inside the Beltway program, also known as I-66 Commuter Choice, is administered by NVTC, in case we'll speak about that in a minute, and supports transit improvements between the Beltway into Washington, D.C. The MOA that governs that grant or that transit program is very detailed. There's a lot of requirements in terms of requirements on the types of projects that are eligible, as well as scoring criteria. The annual amounts are stipulated in the MOA. DRPT also sends an annual payment of the I-66 outside the Beltway funding to NVTC for use in this program as well. The outside the Beltway program is administered by DRPT. Again, the western the western end of the corridor. The annual agreements are stipulated in the agreement between VDOT and DRPT. We don't have as many limitations and restrictions in our MOA. However, as Secretary noted, we are required to ensure that the projects will benefit the toll payers and that there's a nexus kind of on that corridor to whatever transit projects are funded. In this program, we have funded commuter bus service, including buses, as well as operating funding. And then VRE is a new grantee that is in the draft FY27 SIP. So they're a new grantee that are proposed to be funded this fiscal year. The last two slides I have are about program governance. These both are related to this commuter choice program, both the I-66 commuter choice program as well as the 395-95. These are more or less the same, but basically NVTC is required to submit a list of, it says components in here, essentially it's the programs, the applications. DRPT and NVTC work closely on program applications to ensure eligibility. DRPT works with the OAG's office to ensure eligibility of the grant programs as well. As long as CTB feels like, or agrees that NVTC followed the selection process, then the programs are included in the draft SIP for approval in June, along with the rest of the SIP, June 2026. This is the language from the I-395, I-95 Commuter Choice Program. It's almost the same, except the programs are called something different, annual transit investment, but the process is the same, and we'll be back here next fiscal year to talk about the 395, I-95 program. That's all I've got for today. Kate Mattice is going to speak in more detail about the commuter choice successes over the last 10 years, but I'm happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hussein. And so, folks, we want to just give you kind of a quick just briefing and reminder of how these programs work. Ms. Mattice with the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission is going to be talking about some of the recommended projects they're bringing to the board. And so we just wanted to give you a quick overview, again, what this program is, why it exists, where it exists, and what some of the kind of the broad-based strictures are. And so I'd be happy to see if there are any questions. Mr. Lawson.
Secretary, I'm curious, at slide 5, are these amounts spread out over the entire term? Yeah.
Yes.
Through 87? And are these amounts that are over and above debt service to pay for these improvements? These are net numbers, or?
So, Mr. Lawson, I'll jump in here. So let's talk about these in two batches. So we'll talk about the private ones first. So 395, 95, 66 outside, and 495 next. So in each of these, there's a contractual amount that the concessionaire is obligated to pay that then increases at 2.5% a year. So let's talk about 395 because I can do that one without messing up the numbers. So when that was enacted in I believe it was 2018 or 2017, what we put in place then was a requirement for Transurban to provide a payment to DRPT of $15 million a year that would grow at 2.5% a year, each and every year out through 2087. Just trying to draw a distinction between that and 66 inside the Beltway. During COVID, when the toll revenue in 66 inside the Beltway essentially went away, Transurban was still contractually obligated to provide that $15 million and did. And again, it was obviously not 15, it was 15 times 2.5%, kind of compounded there. In terms of where this funding sits in the waterfall of toll revenues, this is not the first draw on the funding there. So in a high level, where I'm certain I will skip certain reserves and other things that would offend the financial people, but to give you a good kind of policy sense, basically O&M is first, debt service to bonds is second, this is third, and then any rate of return to equity is fourth. I want to be clear, there's actually 18 things like in that waterfall, but as a broad types of categories, those are the 4 things. And so we're always going to be making bondholders whole, we'll always be taking care of the road, but prior to the private partner receiving any return on the equity that's invested, they have to make these payments to the Commonwealth. And it was structured that way to give us confidence that essentially those payments would be made, because if we are above their rate of return in the waterfall, they're going to want to make sure they get to that next bucket there. At the same time, we didn't want to impact the financing capacity that was available for the bonds. And so that's why it's kind of down there after the bonds are paid.
Quick follow-up. Do we have an agreement where they're not a fixed payment, but we just base it on the actual revenue? We'll take a percentage, for example?
So let's talk about 66 inside the Beltway. Okay. That is basically after the payments are made for Long Bridge. So this is net of debt financing for Long Bridge and PAYGO through, I believe, 2032. And I'm looking at Ms. Mattice, who will correct me if I'm horribly off on that. That is a net amount there, and that is an estimate. So when you see in 1, 3, and 4, those are specific dollar amounts inflated at 2.5% a year. That's what those are. Those are contractual kind of obligations. What you see in number 2 is an estimate of the remaining toll revenue after the funds are used for Long Bridge for that period of time and to pay the debt that is going to be serviced for the Long Bridge bonds. We do not in those, Mr. Lawson, in 1, 3, and 4, have a provision for if revenues are greater than anticipated, that would increase. We do, however, in our P3 agreements, have revenue sharing provisions. Those revenues are just handled differently and would kind of basically come back to the Commonwealth, and then we would work with this body to adjudicate kind of how they would be allocated. But because those are not assumed and would be above kind of any original financing assumed in the model, they're not baked into any kind of assumed payments that we'll receive. But if we do receive them, we would obviously discuss them at that time.
Mr. Secretary, the cost of maintaining these roads, is that borne by the toll revenue, or does the Commonwealth incur future costs for maintaining these roads?
So again, we're gonna have to break these up into 1, 3, and 4. In those circumstances, that responsibility was transferred to the concessionaire, both for ordinary O&M of the roadway, major maintenance of the roadway, and for the tolling equipment operations and maintenance. For number 2, because that road already existed, and effectively what we did is took a road that was HOV only and converted it into an express lane without initial kind of large-scale widening, the Commonwealth still through tax dollars pays for the roadway O&M and the roadway major maintenance, but the toll funding does pay for the tolling O&M. Mr. Minshew and then Mr. Sellers.
Thank you, Secretary. Ms. Rodena, I wonder if you'd touch on 1 second the question about who pays the tolls for non-HOV drivers. For example, if you have a citizen who lives in Gainesville in Prince William County with a job in Arlington, commutes to work in the AM peak hour, and you have a citizen in Arlington who commutes to Gainesville during the AM peak hour in one-person vehicles, which one pays the toll? The eastbound one, the westbound one, or both? I assume the eastbound. But what are the rules on that?
So, Sarah, I'll handle this one again. So, Mr. Minshew, as I think Mr. Gribben said it well earlier, this is a complicated region. So the answer to your question is different in different parts of the road. So in 66 outside of the Beltway, there are 3 general purpose lanes and 2 express lanes in each direction. And so if someone's opting to use the express lanes, as a reminder, it's a choice. They could pay it either east or westbound, or they could stay in the general purpose lanes in the morning. And let's just talk about the morning because, again, the rules change. On inside the Beltway, however, inside the Beltway is probably the most unique road in America. And so this roadway opened in 1982, and just bear with me, there is a reason I'm going back to that time. And how this was at a time when the federal government played a slightly larger role in setting the terms of where facilities were located and how they would operate. And so there was a decision made by the United States Secretary of Transportation in 1978 called the Coleman decision. And that decision said that in the peak direction, and times have changed, and we'll get to that in a second, which was in the morning meant eastbound, and in the evening meant westbound, that road was HOV only. So it actually opened as HOV 4. And so it was only legal to use that roadway if you had 4 people in your car. Several years later, they cut that down to HOV 3. I believe that was around like 83 or 82. Sometime in the late 80s or early 90s, and just forgive me, I have 3 children, I don't remember the exact date anymore, they then lowered that from 3 to 2. And that is how that road operated for a long time. And so when we converted that from HOV 2 to express lanes in 2017 is when the operations commenced, in the morning for a 4-hour period, you can use the road for free if you're a carpooler or if you're riding a bus, or you can choose to pay a toll heading eastbound. If you're going westbound at that time, the road is a general purpose lane, effectively. It's available free of charge. In the afternoon, it's the exact opposite. So if you're heading eastbound during that 3 to 7 p.m. period, it is effectively open to all users without regard and with no charge. If you're heading westbound, however, during that period of time, you need to have 2 people in your car or be riding a bus to benefit from that fast and reliable trip at no charge, or you can opt to pay a toll during that period of time. And for the other hours I haven't mentioned, it effectively is just a road that anyone can use. So if you're there at 1 p.m., It's just a road. So it's a bit of a complicated story, and this is why I wanted Ms. Schul to go prior to these presentations, because that actually has a little bit more information on how these roads operate, because I suspected that might generate some questions. So we do have some more kind of information about the express lanes in this region, how they're operating, what some of the anticipated effects of those are, that when she arrives we'll be going through. But 66 is very complicated, and 66 inside the Beltway is particularly complicated due to its history, origin, and kind of the original approval of the construction by the federal government.
That was a fascinating bit of history, Mr. Secretary. And that
Maybe
you did,
more than you bargained for.
No, and you did without notes. That was impressive. Is there any other section of the Eisenhower interstate system in America that has that many regulations on it?
It is the only section of road that I'm aware of that from its inception, the entire roadway was managed, if you will, with rules like carpool only. There's a number of other rules I also didn't get into. At this point, most of them have been waived, but the Coleman decision actually had, I believe, 4 to 5 parts, including down to like guardrail appearance and other things of that nature, which have since been waived by act of Congress, and Congressman Wolf sponsored, I think, in the early 2000s. But it is certainly a unique piece of road, and I'm not aware of any other ones. It also ends at a red light, just as a quick reminder for everyone in the district. So we had a lot of discussions as we were discussing this project in the 2016 timeframe. And, Mr. Mitchell, I think you and I were in some of the same closed rooms having these discussions, and, very few interstates end at red lights. And this one ends at a red light at 23rd and Constitution, and right before it does that, it has 2 other freeways essentially merge into it. So US 50, which is a limited access road through most of Arlington, merges with I-66 right at the Roosevelt Bridge, and then just for an extra little kicker, there's a ramp from the George Washington Parkway, which is also effectively a limited access roadway that provides a fair amount of traffic onto that road as we approach the red light at 23rd and Constitution. Any other questions from Mr. Sen?
Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Sellers, I apologize, Ms. Sellers, yes.
No, you're okay. So we're seeing with the outside the Beltway, like Front Royal's now having bus service out there. Is that paid for through these commuter choice programs?
Yes.
Okay. And is there discussion of extending maybe the, I don't know if the managed lanes go that far. I don't believe they do, but expanding it. And then how do you bring, I guess, what county is that? Warren County, Fauquier County, somewhere out there. How do you bring that into these MOAs because they're not part of NVTC or PRTC?
So I'll handle that one again. The decision as to where express lane projects are located would be decisions made kind of by this body, working with the administration and the VDOT commissioner. And so we're going to be talking later when Ms. Schul presents, having our first discussion about the Interstate Operations and Enhancement Program. That is a area where we should really have a lot of those types of discussions. And so we spend a lot of time talking about smart scale. And as I've kind of said, like, hey, that's 7% of the budget. Let's talk about the other areas of the budget. The Interstate Operations and Enhancement Program, which I don't believe has been discussed for some time at this body, is half the size of smart scale. So it's a healthy amount of money kind of on an annual basis. And again, there's certain rules about the obligation of those funds, but we as a body have an opportunity to kind of influence how those funds are deployed and kind of the outcomes that they achieve. And so, that would be, when we talk about those funds, that would be an opportunity to say whether or not we want to look at potential expansion of express lanes or other projects on interstates.
Yeah, because a lot of growth is happening out there. Haymarket going out west is completely different than what it was 10 years ago. So a lot of opportunity.
Questions or comments?
Thank you very much.
All right, next we're going to go to Ms. Mattice, and then after that, we're going to go back to presentation number 2. Good morning.
Good morning. Let me see if I can get everything all queued up here. Oops. Pardon me.
Updated OB.
There we go. Fantastic. Good morning. My name is Kate Mattice. I'm the Executive Director of the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for inviting me to come and speak about 10 years of our commuter choice program. I'm actually very excited to have joining me Daniel Nickelbein, who's the program manager of our commuter choice program. So any tough questions will be either to the Secretary, who's been very involved since the inception of this program, or to Daniel on my team. So one of the things I did want to start with, and I think that, thank you, Sarah, for really framing this well. This is a unique program insofar that we're reinvesting toll revenues that are generated up here in Northern Virginia. This is not a state aid program. This is all generated from tolls. And so I think that's really important to know. But because of the relationship we have in the way the Commonwealth is actually the recipient of those tolls and they come to NVTC for distribution, it is included as a part of the DRPT 6-year improvement program, the list of projects and those revenues that come to NVTC. So you actually have that a part of your action, but the reality is those revenues are ones that are generated up here in Northern Virginia for projects up here in Northern Virginia. So I know that Ms. Schul is going to be doing a fantastic overview. Hopefully I haven't stolen any of her thunder. Maybe we're just merely bookmarking it a little bit. But there's an incredible benefit of putting express lanes in transit together. And I think that's something that we have really seen. The ability to take 50 people who otherwise would be in a car, either in the general purpose lanes or in those express lanes paying tolls, could be sitting in a single bus. And so the program that we have here is really a way to effectively remove vehicles, which means both for the general purpose lanes as well as the express lanes is the ability to be moving things more reliably too far. But the programs that NVTC has with the Commuter Choice Program specifically do relate to the I-66 program as well as the 395 and 95 program. We have a data-driven competitive grant program. It is really all about investing toll revenues to a range of project types that are, again, the benefit of moving more people through that corridor. We do have a 2-year funding cycle. For those of you who've been sitting on the CTB, every year we actually bring a 2-year funding program as a part of the SIP. 1 year, it's 2-year funding of 66, and that's this year. And on the other years, it's a 2-year program for I-395 and 95. So we sort of alternate and do a 2-year funding cycle, bringing one of those to this body every single year. So we mentioned this is a program that it's a statewide program, but it's a regional program. We work very closely, again, with DRPT, VDOT, and the Commonwealth in this board. We have the administration at the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission for the 395 and 95 corridor. Because it joins with our commission to the south, we actually do that. That agreement is jointly with the Potomac and Rappahannock Transportation Commission, but they have actually given the oversight and the administration of that project, that effort, I should say, to NVTC. And then again, the entities that are benefiting by providing either additional transit capital or transit operating or even other things as well are those local jurisdictions and transit agencies noted below. The type of projects that are eligible through the MOA do include bus and rail service. That includes Metro Rail as well as VRE. We do have the ability to fund also capital, and I'll talk a little bit about some of those capital projects that we've supported. We can fund roadway improvements as well as access to transit, projects that can get more people to a metro station, for example, or to a VRE station. And we also can do some support of buying fare incentives, incentives for carpooling and van pooling, also known as TDM. These are all things, again, within the memorandum of agreement that we have with the Commonwealth. Funds, we must obligate those funds within 2 years, and they must be fully expended within 5 years. So when it comes to the capital projects in which we are supporting, there really is a target on things that are shovel-ready and ready to go. And in addition, we really get this again in the MOA. The requirements is really about maximizing person throughput, improving the mobility on the corridor, providing those travel choices. So again, people do not need to be in a single occupancy vehicle. And again, all of this is really about reliability as well as safety on these corridors. Our program is a competitive and data-driven evaluation process. Every single project comes through is screened for eligibility. We do that very closely with the Department of Rail and Public Transit. As the Secretary mentioned, there are legal parameters at which this funding can be used. So those projects that then get through that legal scoring get to a place of being able to be technically evaluated. The lion's share of this is a technical merit, and it is really, again, about person throughput, travel time saving, are we ability to connect people from transportation modes to other transportation modes? Are we ensuring that people are using the corridor and not diverting to local streets? That's something that we've had a great deal of conversation in the early years, as well as those projects providing some level of accessibility, whether it be ADA or just people in general, as well as equity. We do also have a consideration of cost effectiveness. And finally, when we have localities or transit systems are applying for multiple projects, We want to know what their priority is, and that's what that applicant preference is. So to date, and then this is actually, again, over 10 years, both the 66 and 395 corridor, we have invested $212 million. Now, you actually have an additional set of funding that's coming your way, so that 212 does not include this current program of projects. We've supported 15 transit agencies, cities, and counties with their projects, and we've had 72 unique projects. And again, this is along 66 as well as 395. The projects that we put out have primarily been new and improved bus service. The best way to move the most amount of people on these long corridors is really providing more buses. And so the bus service has really been the lion's share. But I also want to point out that we've actually done investments in park and ride lots and other capital improvements that may be a one-time investment to finish, but those are going to be things that are going to be benefited for years to come. We have provided a small amount of funding to get more people to transit systems through our access to transit stations, whether it be just completing the last little bit of a pedestrian trail to a metro station or what have you. We also have supported both metro and VRE capital projects, as I mentioned, park and ride lots. And we also have had a little bit of money to be able to support some safety improvements as well as ITS improvements along the corridor. So to date, and again, many of these assets that we've funded are going to be seeing benefits far into the future. What we've actually been able to do is save a lot of money, a lot of time, and improve safety upon these corridors. The projects that we've invested in have saved those people who've been taken off. They've not needed to use over $25.9 million in fuel costs. And I had a little bit of fun. Of course, that's obviously a moving target right now. That was based when gas was $3.50 a gallon. So obviously, I think I saw $3.81 as I was coming over here. But really, so that obviously is very important for the day-to-day affordability of people taking. But the other thing is when I talk about reliability and moving one vehicle versus 50, we're talking about improvement in safety. We're talking about improvement in travel time, and there's the ability to avoid delay on those corridors. And really, when it comes down to just to date, is moving more than 10.5 million people through these corridors just from these projects. And I will say some of these projects are for park and ride lots where people are carpooling and vanpooling. We're not even capturing those benefits. Oh, actually, before I go back, the other thing I did want to mention is I'm talking to the providers who've been doing the bus services along 395 or 95 and 66. Just pulling from 66, both OmniRide that serves Prince William County and West, as well as Fairfax Connector, have seen that their bus route trips to Washington, D.C. are now 15 minutes faster than they were before. In some instances, that's about a 25% change. So these are people who are actually getting to where they need to go much more reliably. And so we're seeing the same type of positive impacts when it comes to the 95 corridor as well. So I do want to do just 3 highlights of some of the communities that we've been supporting. Obviously, there's a lot of things that are going on. But we've really seen the most incredible benefits are really on the further outside routes on 95, and I'll talk a little bit more about 66 in a minute. So for Stafford County is actually one of the fastest growing counties in the country. And one of the things prior to the Commonwealth taking on the agreements to expand and enhance the express lanes on the 95 corridor, it was one of the worst hotspots for traffic. And I think we all know that. You may have got the punishment of that coming up here. So we've actually been able to make some real difference in the investments we've made in Stafford County. We've actually been able to help with park and ride lots, new bus routes and coaches. There are 27 daily trips that are bringing people up. There's a lot of service, a lot of people who live in that area that have military and military adjacent, so the ability to take people up to the Pentagon, and that's really what these routes are doing. They're taking people to the Pentagon, they're taking to places in Washington, D.C. But also for Stafford County, we also have, while we have these buses that are going, we also have the complimentary service of the VRE and really helping them get ready for their ability to take advantage of Long Bridge. And so we've invested in the ability to expand the VRE platform at Leland Road. Talking a little bit about the 66 corridor, and really this is about that inside the Beltway corridor. Helping Loudoun County and the ability to move people through that corridor has been really important. Again, this is another place where we've been able to invest in a park and ride lot that while we have just a couple of services there, it's actually benefiting other bus routes as well as vanpool and carpool coming from that Loudoun County lot. Likewise, it's commuter bus routes, new coaches. But the other thing we did for Loudoun County, especially early on, was providing incentives and marketing so people realize, by the way, there are fantastic services that can get you through this corridor and can get you over to take advantage of these routes, whether they be commuter choice routes, but also taking advantage of other transit movements that can get people from Loudoun County into Washington, D.C. and Arlington. And then finally, we're here in the city of Alexandria. A lot of people think, I mean, I've obviously talked a lot about outside the Beltway, but the ability to move people off 395 as well as 66 inside the Beltway is also a very important thing. If we can get our local riders off of those corridors, it does make it easier for more either freight or people to be moving through those corridors. So there are two projects that we basically help launch, and that's the line 35 and 36 of DASH, and that is Alexandria's local bus system. These have actually been incredibly successful bus lines. These are, again, running parallel to 395. And what they're seeing is the ability to run buses every 10 to 15 minutes. They are the strongest performing bus routes in Alexandria. They actually represent 2.5 million riders every year on these two bus lines. And that's about 45% of all the bus ridership in Alexandria are moving on these. As a result, so successful, we've actually been able to buy bigger buses. So again, one vehicle that can take more people. So we've been able to support the ability to, again, move more people through these corridors. So I do want to pause and step a little bit towards what we're doing this year. Again, this is included in the 6-year improvement program for DRPT, and this is our I-66 program of projects. As Sarah did a wonderful job, we have a process that is outlined in the MOA. We have followed with this, worked very closely, obviously, with DRPT. So we did our call for projects in the fall. We've done that scoring and review, like I mentioned earlier. We did have a public comment period. We actually had over 400 public comments. This is actually a public comment effort that we actually just got a communication award for, which is just fantastic. We're really getting the public out there to get them first aware that these projects exist, as well as to speak up their support or concern about them. Overall, though, overwhelming people are supporting these investments. We had it approved by our commission for referral to this board. And again, we look forward to being approved as part of the funding package next month. The one thing that's really, I think, fantastic about the way we run this program is basically July 1, that funding's available for those projects to happen. So I think that's a really important thing. We can actually get this money out the door very quickly to get those projects up and running. So included later in your package are actually the full list, but I just want to give you a big picture for it. We're looking at a $60.5 million in awards. Now, the Secretary had mentioned we have a certain amount of money that we have from each corridor every year that's included in the MOA. For 66 in particular, during the first couple of years of the pandemic, it was a very slow moving corridor. We did not see a lot of revenues. We also did not fund a lot of services. So one of the things that's somewhat unique about this program is when it comes to funding transit operations, we will fund it for 2 years, and they can only come back for more funding if they are proving that those projects are successful. So we actually went a little bit quieter. We did smaller calls for projects. So we actually were able to save some of the money and now are able to award a bigger program of projects this year, which is something really fantastic. We're looking at 14 projects. Total, 13 of them are bus service projects that include bus purchases, and we also have a rail capital project included in there. And so again, just highlighting some of the localities that will benefit with the approval of these projects. I mentioned we have a very engaged public all throughout the corridors and what we do here. So again, this is just included in your materials. I'm not going to read these out, but I have to tell you, it really warms your heart when you read some of the public comments about what this has made a difference, whether you're commuting from Fredericksburg or you're on the local bus in Alexandria. These programs are something that people are relying on. And I'd like to also say, while we're getting public comments from those who typically are taking the transit, as somebody who drives on the 395 corridor with carpool, HOV, almost every day, it truly is providing a more reliable ride, knowing that we can put more folks in these vehicles.
Secretary.
Oh.
On that one, so for several years, I was one of these riders, and you'll see members of Congress get on these buses, take the slug lines. So very interesting conversations you can have, and it absolutely improves the quality of life. You can get on a commuter bus, and for me, going to the Pentagon from Stafford County, it allowed me to get there on the 8 o'clock bus and be in a 9 o'clock meeting, you know, and it allowed me to be there when my son was in elementary school and get him on the bus and then take the bus. And buses coming back south start as early as, I think, 12:30. And the thing that's, you know, helped professionally is when I would go and cheer, you know, I gotta think of the right word, when I would go and recruit people to come work at the Pentagon, typically from Quantico, and say, we have this position, please consider it. They would say, I don't want the commute. And I would say, it takes me less time to get to the Pentagon because of the bus than it did to get to Quantico. And so having those conversations with people did open it up. And something maybe people don't know is, as government employees, you have to give up your parking pass to get the subsidy. So you can actually see people choosing to take the transit over parking there at the Pentagon. And it really was a great, great thing that is still relatively new. So I hope these programs continue. These are excellent programs that improve the quality of life for a lot of folks.
Well, now I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Mattice. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Mr. Minshew.
Hey, Mr. Secretary, I really appreciate that you put on Ms. Bachman of the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority with Ms. Mattice of the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, because it showed what different jobs they have. I recall when you were Deputy Secretary, there was a bill filed to force a statutory combination of those two groups in the interest of government efficiency. That bill lasted for one meeting until it became manifestly observable what a bad idea it was. And I thought it was very appropriate, because many people think, well, why do you have these two groups with NV at the start, really NVT at the start? But I think by looking at this, they obviously work in very close synchrony with each other, but have two completely different roles. And so I think it's really helpful that we had both of these great civic leaders of the respective organizations to talk what they do and how it really is different, and that they need to stay separate and work in harmony with each other.
Just as a reminder, we had PRTC at our meeting in Fredericksburg, which also covers 3 jurisdictions in Northern Virginia. So we didn't leave them out, in case anyone doesn't remember. They were there in April. Mr. Coleman.
Thank you, Secretary. One of your earlier slides and during your presentation, you mentioned 50 cars off the road, 1 bus. Are there any assumptions made, or is that driven by data, or is there a 50-passenger bus? How do you arrive at taking 50 cars off of 1 bus?
So that was an illustrative. So obviously, we do look at ridership when projects are being applied for and what that looks like. But the big coach buses can take up to 54 passengers. Likewise, when it comes to a local bus, I actually need to confirm what the numbers on local buses are. It could be as many, if not more. So the 50 was meant to be as a ballpark. And those coach buses that are coming up, as Ms. Sellers mentioned, that are coming up along 95, as well as 66, those OmniRide buses are full. So those are 50 to 54 people who are in a bus every single one. So yeah, so that it was, you know, illustrative, but at the same time, a full bus can have over 50 people in it, yeah.
Mr. Coleman, I think to the point, to add a little bit more color to the point you made, Ms. Mattice said this briefly in her presentation, but when folks apply for new bus service, they only are able to receive funding for kind of a demonstration period, and they then track the performance of that service. And if you're not meeting certain ridership levels, the kind of understanding is that demonstration is done. Do not come back and ask for kind of additional operating funding there. And so it is something that is baked into the memorandum of agreement and that NVTC has, you know, really embraced as part of this process. You know, when we set this up, the real point of, you know, that project was a very difficult project to get implemented. And we wanted to make sure that we could show people that those toll revenues were going to things that were helping move more people through that corridor. And so there is, again, tracking and performance requirements built into the memorandum of agreement to ensure that those dollars are kind of driving results over time. There's also provisions to ensure that those dollars can't all be used for operating, for example, over time. And so there will always be incrementally new investments made in each round with those dollars because of the structure of that memorandum of agreement that we put in place back in, I keep picking different years.
It is 10
around
years.
2016.
Yes. Yes.
Director Zimmerman.
just add, these are some of the strongest performing routes that we have across the entire state. And I think some of them perform so strongly, as Director Mattice was saying, that they need to provide larger buses or more additional service. And some of the lines are even breaking into different segments as they're showing and growing and building that ridership for each one. So, and I'm sure Member Sellers probably knows, like, they are very full buses that are on these commuter routes that are being supported through this. But as we look across the state and the ridership on systems and the cost per rider, also very efficient in that way.
I have a question.
Sellers.
Are we seeing any of the folks making the applications put in things for, like, where you can lock up your bike, or charge your either your e-bike or your scooter? Because we are seeing more and more people, I'd say, want to do that, but right now, like the couple in Stafford, one of the lots, I don't know if they have a bike rack at all.
So that is a unique finite project? No. That said, because a project scores well if it moves the most people. So insofar that there's a package of projects or elements that go into a project, we can find out a little bit more, but we want to support the best way for the most people to take advantage of these projects. So how the localities or the transit systems package things, those types of things would be eligible, but at the same time, the scoring is based about how many folks are moving on that project.
I think what you're telling us, Ms. Mattice, is if someone is building a new park and ride lot and they want to include those components, that might be in a given application, but we're not seeing independent applications for those types of things, at least at this time.
That is correct, Mr. Secretary.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Next, we're going back to presentation number 2, and I'd like to invite Deputy Secretary Schul up to the podium.
Oh, okay. So we're going to talk about the IOEP today. And so there's a lot to say about this program, and there will be more presentations upcoming, including presentations on each of the specific interstates and exactly what's going on there. But because of where we are and to align with the presentations you've just heard, today we're going to start with the portion that relates to express lanes. So our goal is to begin this familiarization or refamiliarization, depending on how long you've been on this board. And the key background to know is that this program is 20% of the construction budget. The board establishes a process to evaluate and prioritize strategies. This is in code. This has been done in cycles over years past, and we're currently implementing the last strategy, which I think is from 2021. And one of the reasons we're talking about express lanes today is because part of the code says that we should prioritize operational and demand management, TDM is transportation demand management, travel demand management strategies that improve reliability and safety. And that express lanes explicitly should be considered as one of those strategies if general purpose lanes are not anticipated to provide long-term benefits. So that is why an express lane presentation fits within the IOEP. So today we're going to talk about what is an express lane, the benefits, some concerns that are brought up, and how we mitigate those concerns. I have Q&A at the end, but as always, you should feel free to hop in and ask questions whenever you like.
And just to reiterate the point that Ms. Schul made at the beginning of this, there are many strategies and appropriate projects that can be funded out of the IEOP. Because of the other things that were on the agenda and because of where we are in the state, we are starting the discussion for the IOP with express lanes, but we are going to be coming back and talking about other things. So I don't want anyone to leave today's meeting thinking the only thing we do with the Interstate Operations and Enhancement Program is express lanes. That would be an incorrect takeaway. So I just want to say that one more time for those here and anyone listening online. This is just the first of many presentations on an important program that the board hasn't done a full allocation of since 2021.
So we want to begin a longer educational process. There's no action today except to learn. All right, so what is an express lane? Sometimes you'll hear these referred to as hot lanes. Sometimes you'll hear the term managed lanes, especially if you're dealing, I think, in a more jargon, technical expert specific term, but we're all talking about the same thing, and I'll use express lanes throughout this presentation. So, an express lane, I have the US law definition and the Code of Virginia law definition. Not going to give those are just for reference. But in plain English, it is a lane in which drivers may choose being the key word, to drive, if either they have more than 2 or 3 occupants. It could be different, express lanes have different rules, which includes being in a bus and van pool, and usually they can drive in those for free if they meet that high occupancy threshold, or they can choose to drive in it if they pay a toll. Choice. The key feature of an express lane is choice. It is different from a facility that is just tolled, and the only way to get down that corridor is to pay the toll. These are a different concept. So the key features are the high occupancy vehicles, or HOV users, get to go for free. You can also choose to go on the same highway for free if you are in a general purpose lane, so you have 2 free options. And there is paying if you choose to, and usually there is variable paying that reacts to different thresholds of congestion and volume to maintain a constant flow of pretty fast movement in the express lanes. So those are officially what makes an express lane. There are also some things that make a good express lane, by which I mean the types of express lanes that this board might be interested in and Virginia might be interested in. First of all, it's in the right place. Express lanes are not always the right solution to congestions on corridors, and there are good studies that have been done to show that it's in the right place. 2, and this has come out of some of the earliest express lanes across the country, it needs to have true lane separation. So what I mean is you can't just casually move into the express lane and then move back out right before, say, one of the transponders comes up, right? You actually have to have a barrier. So you can, and some of the earliest lanes, especially out in California, did not have true lane separation, and that did not go well. And a good express lane, as I think you've just heard in excellent example, is partnered with expanded transit options to maximize the benefit of the investment to build that lane, right? The more high occupancy vehicles you can get going down that express lane, the better. And some of our express lanes have served corridors where there wasn't existing transit, so they funded the first transit. Other express lanes have created more options. Any questions on these very big picture concepts? And we're gonna get more granular now. Okay, Virginia is a leader in express lanes. We have done a lot since 2012. Most of the ones have been up here in Northern Virginia, but starting the year before last and continuing to roll out over the next couple of years, we will see a network of express lanes in Hampton Roads as well. They have been funded in a mix of public finance and P3 finance, and there have been a mix of financings in terms of how that money was leveraged in federal loans, TIFIA loans, and how much of it was redirected explicitly to transit operations. So we have a wide experience in this Commonwealth, more than most states. All right, I'm gonna go through the benefits, and then we'll talk about some of the concerns. So the first benefit, which I have belabored, is that it offers choice. It's not a requirement. You always have a choice. The second benefit is that it, in fact, carries more people in peak congestion. So what we see here are some statistics from last year, northbound 95. I just participated in this express lane.
We discussed that in your absence.
Yes, it was really lovely, you guys. I was above 70 the whole time. So what you see on the left is the AM peak period. You can see that the equivalent vehicles are more or less moving in the 2 lanes. But again, we don't really care about vehicles getting to where they need to go. We care about people getting to where they need to go. So on the right, you see the number of people moved per lane in the peak morning. And you see that is a very significant benefit for an express lane. So again, an express lane can move more people on peak than a general purpose lane. So when we talk about the goal of lanes as improving capacity in terms of getting people where they need to go, express lanes are more effective in congested environments.
And I should just note, this isn't a one snapshot in time and this happened to be the case. This is actually updated figures. The first time we did this was for the 2019 I-95 Corridor Improvement Program, and the story was essentially the exact same then. So pre-COVID, we saw stats like this. We're now several years post-COVID, and we're still seeing stats like this. And I assure you there is a gray line for buses in the express lane kind of column there in terms of vehicles. It's just really, really, really small. So Mr. Coleman, to your point earlier about how many people are in them, there's some buses there but there's a healthy number of people on those buses, which is why you can see that thicker gray line kind of on the other one over on the right where we're looking at people.
Exactly. So this is 95. We pulled stats from 66. The same effective story. The magnitude of difference depends on the corridor itself. And this is a PM peak look. And one of the interesting things I wanted to mention is that in all of our Northern Virginia lanes, we see this very constant trend, which is a few fewer vehicles per lane, but many more people per lane on peak. In situations where general purpose lanes get extremely congested in other express lanes, you can actually see the express lanes move more vehicles than the general purpose lanes. And you might say, how can that be? The point was to make them cost money so that fewer people would go in them. Well, and so here's an example from Orange County, which is, of course, one of the most congested places in America, Southern California. You get more vehicles per lane, mainly because you experience something called breakdown in the general purpose lane, where something happens to make traffic so terrible that it is moving extremely slowly. And quite simply, if the cars are moving faster, more can get through per hour. So if you can avoid that breakdown condition, you can even have this extraordinary benefit of these express lanes, which, again, we haven't seen consistently in Virginia, but you can conceive of.
Secretary.
Awesome.
Just curious, do we track things other than peak? And
Yes.
if you do you see the same differential? Because it intrigues me, even in non-rush hour, to see people paying a toll.
We do track them. I can certainly pull statistics. I would say that the design of express lanes is to mitigate peak congestion, so that's sort of how we evaluate our success.
I'd be curious.
But yeah,
if
I
you
can
see
certainly
the
pull
same
those.
enhancement in non-peak times. I bet we do.
I think you can. Again, the HOV users can always go for free, and driving with fewer vehicles is less stressful, and I think a lot of people make that choice. And you never know when the congestion might pop up, so I agree. So again, how can it be? Because we've got more people per vehicle and because it stays faster moving. We also see clear evidence that carpooling picks up when there's a free carpooling option available, so you incentivize this behavior. And of course, as we just heard, when you make buses available and they move quickly through the congested region, people are excited to take them. There's also a component that because most express lanes are limited access, a lot of studies have shown that the fact that you have fewer people coming in and people going out means there's less weaving, which just makes them keep on flowing faster, makes them safer, et cetera, right? That limited access is a benefit to all of this. All right. So the next benefit is that they can, well, first let's start. One of the conditions we had for when you must consider express lanes in our code is when it is clear that the general purpose lane it's not going to solve your capacity problem. It is clear from the research and our experience that over the long term, adding general capacity lanes to large congested highways, freeways, however you want to call them, is not a long-term solution for congestion or reliability. Reliability mean the odds that I can think it's going to take me 30 minutes to get to where I'm going, and it's probably going to be about 30 minutes. There are a pile of academic research from different states about this. The fundamental situation is that you add new capacity, it improves things for a few years, but then you think, hey, I can get to DC from this area in 30 minutes, maybe I can afford to live a little further outside of town, and you start to induce more and more demand, it fills back up, and you're in the same problem you started with 10, 15 years ago, but you spent $200 million widening the highway, or 400, or whatever it is. All right, now, we have done studies in the past when we added express lanes to show that according to all the things we know about traffic behavior and all that we can predict reasonably about the future, when we chose to add express lanes, we had done studies to say that we don't think the general purpose lanes are a long-term solution. So here is some work that went into the I-95. You can see the scenario in 2019. Red is bad for congestion. In 2030, we were saying, hey, if we don't do anything, there will be more red and it will go further north and it will be worse. So then we modeled, what if we add another general purpose lane? So by 2030, you can see, hey, if we add another general purpose lane, it's better than no general purpose lane, but it's still worse than 2019. And by 2040, it's terrible, right? So these are the types of studies we show to say, hey, even if we add these new general purpose lanes based on our understanding of this environment, we're not really going to solve our congestion problem for this area of 95. Does express lanes magically solve congestion? No, but it does solve reliability. And so that's the split we want to talk about. So what we see in a lot of our models and then our post hoc analyses is that the impact on congestion is similar to adding a general purpose lane, but the impact on reliability is greater because you maintain a reliable option. So what we're looking at here is a study that went into the decisions to add express lanes in this graphic. They were called hot lanes to the Hampton Roads environment. So what you see in the leftmost map is the expected congestion in 2040 going across that bridge and around. It looks terrible. What you see on the right is the same expected congestion if we add an HOT lane. It still looks pretty bad, but not much worse, right? And in fact, because of the different ways that people move in and out of that corridor, it actually is better in Norfolk, but maybe a little worse down south of Portsmouth. But what is different is that green dotted line, which means there's a choice to get all the way through this in a reliable amount of minutes in your high level of service, which means you're moving pretty quickly, right? So that's what we mean when we say that they can maintain a reliable option, and the impacts on congestion, if we're making the right choices, are fairly similar.
And so, Ms. Schul, I just want to hit on this point. So this was an analysis done by the Hampton Roads Transportation Planning Organization when the Commonwealth was partnering with them to put in place the new high-rise bridge. So widening that 10-mile section of 64 from Bowers Hill to just past 464, and then also adding the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel and widening that. And so in that general purpose lane scenario, they're the same number of lanes as there are in the express lane scenario. In total. And I think to Ms. Schul's point here, what the region saw as they looked at this is they said, we are getting ready to bond their version of NVTA's regional revenue source, HR tax revenue source, for a very long time. And what we want to make sure is that we see a change and benefit to the region. And their takeaway from this study was, if we do this and we do this as general purpose lanes, in the future we're just going to be sitting in traffic again, and we will have bonded our revenues. If we bond these revenues and we implement the new lanes as express lanes, the traffic will still be better than if you didn't do anything, right? But there will also be a fast and reliable choice that will be free for people who are carpooling or available for a toll for folks when they need it. And so it was the distinction of being able to have that choice that got them to lean towards, as a region, this concept of putting in place those express lanes. Because again, those projects were mostly funded by the Regional Transportation Authority in Hampton Roads, and so that was a collaborative decision between the Commonwealth Transportation Board at that time and the Hampton Roads region.
All right. There's also interesting evidence that in the short term, so now I'm moving into your 5 and 10-year window, not your 30-year window, express lanes do mitigate corridor congestion for the general purpose lanes, right? So you not only have this benefit for the people in the congestion in the express lanes, but it creates benefit for the people in the general purpose lanes. So what we see here are some before and after studies on I-40-95 northbound, showing that adding the express lanes, what you see on the left is pre-opening on both, and on the right is post-opening, and we're only looking at the general purpose lanes. Basically, each time we look at the post part of the right, you see less orange and red. That means there's faster speeds and less congestion. So what we see here is benefits even to people who are not riding in the lanes. This is because express lanes are a form of new capacity, and you're removing certain types of cars that might want to be going very fast, which might create some issues with different differential speeds, all kinds of reasons that there are benefits to the GP lanes by the existence of the HOT lanes or the express lanes. And again, we've tried to select one from each of our corridors to give you examples, but there's lots more data. If you are interested in one of these express lanes that's in your region, we can work with our operators to pull similar statistics like this for the express lane of your choice. All right, and these lanes encourage transit and carpooling. We want to, in Virginia, encourage transit and carpooling all the time, right? It gets us more economic activity, more mobility, with less wear and tear in our system, fewer emissions, et cetera. Making a freer, faster option is a really strong way to encourage this. And as we saw in these statistics, most of the people in these express lanes on peak are in one of these high occupancy vehicles, whether it's a van pool, a bus, or an HOV carpooling situation. And what that means is that they're not paying, and we'll get back to that in a few minutes. The other really important benefit that I think is very relevant to this body is by opening up an express lane, you open up a line of revenue. And that line of revenue can finance very large projects. We do not have all the money we want. Y'all know the total amount available from SmartScale last round. All the numbers I've highlighted on this slide of what these projects cost are bigger than the total number of projects all summed together that got funded by the last round of SmartScale.
By several factors.
Yes. So if your region has big ambitions, we don't have a lot of pure state-funded opportunities to make them happen without creating a revenue stream like this and leveraging it. So this is an opportunity to go big where we want to go big, and that's important to this body. And coming up sooner in the workshop agenda, when we do it right, it doesn't just benefit the folks who are using that road, it benefits everyone in the corridor. All right, those were the benefits. Now I want to talk through some concerns that are often raised about express lanes, but first, Mr. Stant, did you have a question?
Mr. Stant.
I'm convinced that what you have said here is true. My problem is that the day that the express lane opened up in Hampton Roads, I got a plethora of letters from people saying, this is the dumbest thing I ever heard. Do you think that this has been communicated to the people who are actually paying these tolls and that they understand what they're paying for? I think that's an issue that needs to be explored, because I'm not sure the average driver understands the reason why we did what we did and why it's working. That's just a point that.
No, I hear you loud and clear there, Mr. Stanton. I think, it is our responsibility, both as like the staff in transportation and also you all as the transportation board, for us to have these discussions and to talk again about how things are working, the opportunity costs that we have, and the results that we are seeing. We have to do that on an ongoing basis. I don't think we have talked as much about how some of these projects worked and the reason they were put in place for a period of time. And so what we are trying to do here and in some of the meetings we've had leading up to this and will continue to do moving forward is to have the discussions about why are we making the decisions that we are making? What are the trade-offs that we've considered? What are the outcomes that we expect? And are we realizing them? It is our job to make these decisions and then to explain them to people. We should not expect like the traveling public who is just trying to get to their job, at whatever it might be, to understand all of these things. But that means we have to talk about it to provide them with that information. They can't, it's our job to give that to them. And so we take that very seriously. That's why, my first meeting I talked about transparency and accountability. We have to explain ourselves to the public so that they can determine whether or not they appreciate the decisions we've made or feel otherwise. And if they feel otherwise, I'm assuming they'll tell us about them. But in the absence of explaining those decisions, I think people often can be concerned and then they feel like they're not heard when we don't provide that response. And so moving forward, we are going to be providing that information to individuals, but it's also a kind of an ongoing discussion with folks. So, just like I may not remember something that happened in a field I'm not involved in, I need people to keep reminding me why something took place, because I'm not involved in healthcare, but healthcare affects me, and there's many people who aren't involved day to day in transportation decision making, but it sure affects them, and so we just need to make sure we're providing that information to folks. And so it's it's important to understand where you think that hasn't been happening enough, and so that we can kind of redouble our efforts to try and provide more information in those areas so that folks understand the decisions that we're making. And again, at the end of the day, they may agree with us, they may not agree with us, but they need to understand why we've made those decisions so that they can participate, in that public process and provide comment to you all, legislators, and other elected officials as we all kind of endeavor on this public policy and decision-making process. Mr. Griffin.
Just to a little national context into this, I've been in this area for decades now, and that concern that you received is very, very typical. It also tends to be very front-loaded. So SR 91 in California that Ms. Schul mentioned earlier, one of the earliest express lanes in the country, if not the earliest express lane in the country, lots of opposition going in. They opened them up, people started using them, then someone proposed getting rid of them or at least capping the toll so the congestion return, and there was a huge pushback against that. So what tendency is across the country is once these become operational, not that we shouldn't continue communicating the value of them and expressing people's concerns, but historically, at least in this country, once they become operational, they become very popular.
All right. But building on that, I think one of the poorest communication, one of the worst communication failures this whole industry has been summed up in this term Lexus lanes, which is when people talk about these, they call them the Lexus lanes because they see the headlines, and the headlines are what are communicated, that, oh my gosh, it costs $43 to drive all the way the 45 miles in Northern Virginia, or whatever it may be. That's only for rich people, right? That is the most frequent concern that is brought up. The next is questions about benefiting the general purpose lanes. And third, and this is, I think, only for places that already have them, but it is a rising conversation, is that people cheat them, and that makes people angry. So, on I-66 and I-95, 55 and 58% of peak users, respectively, are using these lanes for free. And I think that is one of the most important statistics we collectively need to communicate repeatedly to our constituents. And if we seek to do more of this, it's one of the things we need to be actively communicating about. It is not a Lexus lane. It is a free, reliable choice for people who make a beneficial choice to carpool, take the Omni ride, take the bus, take one of the other options. And in Northern Virginia, there's a lot of van pool options as well, and in Hampton Roads. So there are absolutely options. There are options that we as leaders are trying to encourage generally for economic and environmental reasons, and freeing up parking in our congested parked cities where people are going, and over half of these users are taking it for free. So that's a key takeaway, is these pie charts.
And so, Michelle, back to the point you made earlier, unlike, let's say, for example, just a road that's, the whole road is tolled. And that's a toll you're expecting someone to pay every day because it's just a fixed toll that you have to pay to use that road. On the express lanes, the folks who are supposed to be using these every day are the people who are carpooling and riding a bus. When you're paying a toll, that's a day where you made a specific choice because of your needs in that day to use the express lane. And so I know I've seen a number of stats here, but of the folks who pay the toll, something like north of 80% do it less than 5 times a month. So the people who are paying these tolls, this is not an everyday choice, I'm certain. So please, you can find someone who probably does do it every single day. But my real point is the vast majority of users who are using those facilities are doing it on an infrequent basis, as needed, based on the conditions in their life. Maybe you got stuck late at work and your daycare charges a certain fee for each 5-minute increment, like mine does, if you're late when you get there. And maybe it's advantageous to pay that toll because the toll is less than the 5-minute fee that keeps kind of cranking up every time you're sitting there in traffic. So again, we don't know the motivations of each individual who makes that choice, but this is a choice. And it's not a choice that is intended for someone to make on a daily basis unless you are that carpooler who has kind of arranged a system where you're using it for free every day, or that bus rider who has found the park and ride lot and that express bus service that meets their needs to use it every day. And so I also think when you look at this, understand that when we're seeing the bus riders and carpoolers, those are daily users. Those are people who have made a choice on how they're commuting and are benefiting from this every single day. And the thing I think that's also really important is if they weren't doing that and they weren't carpooling, we're adding a lot more cars to the general purpose lanes in that circumstance if we don't have them carpooling in these lanes. And a lot less people would ride the buses in these corridors if they were sitting in the same traffic you would sit in when you were driving by yourself and you got to pick the radio station, right? And so it's kind of a different type of circumstance. And so the thing we're also just not seeing here is what would 95 and 66 be like if half the people on the bus and the people who are carpooling were each in their own car. And that would really, really change the congestion that we see on those roadways today. Ms. Sellers.
Just for those who aren't from this area and along the 95 corridor, we don't call it carpooling, we call it slugging. And it is very, very specific to Northern Virginia. It is something that Northern Virginia created along the 95 corridor, which was also something that was expressed when the lanes were changed over to hot lanes, is what's this going to do to slugging? Because it is it's part of who people are here in this area, and you use that term, and people who aren't from here say, what in the world is that? And it's literally organized hitchhiking. They go to commuter lots, they stand in a line, and they get in a car with a stranger every single day. So it is a very unique thing here to Northern Virginia, and probably as part of as much a part of the identity of Northern Virginia as anything in transit and transportation. So just want to give you that, that term.
How do they pay?
You don't pay. So some people have parking passes, some people, and so, you know, you get to use the lanes for free, or you don't have to, back when it was HOV lanes, you don't sit in traffic. And so the benefit to the driver, who likely has a paid parking spot, either here in Northern Virginia or in DC, is they take people for free to move faster through the lanes. And yeah, there's no pay. I mean, I've seen when gas prices get really high, people will talk about it. But for the most part, it just works. And that's kind of why you also see the Ride Connect, GW Ride Connect, those work, because the concern is how will I get home if I can't get a ride, and then GW Ride Connect can come pick you up. And so just something very unique here to this area. And if you've never seen it, go over to the Pentagon here in a few hours and you'll start seeing the lines be created. It's very interesting.
And Mr. Stan, to Mrs. Seller's point, this is a wildly organized, structured kind of thing. And so they have their own, they have a website, they have their own email chain. So if you go to sluglines.com, you can figure out which park and ride lot to go to and where to stand at that park and ride lot, depending on where you want to go. There are set rules or an etiquette for kind of expected behavior. So, you know, like both passengers sit in the back seat. The driver's not supposed to play offensive music. Again, if you're at the Horner Road Park and Ride lot, I think there's literally 10 separate slug lines in addition to the express bus pickup locations, and you go to a certain place if you want to go to Navy Yard, a different place if you want to go to Capitol Hill, and then in the district or in Northern Virginia closer in, they have those same types of things at various corners, and so you know which corner to go to in Navy Yard if you want to catch a ride home there, and so it's very organized, and as Ms. Sellers indicated, this started a long time ago in this region. We actually had the first HOV lanes in the country were here, and so it kind of built up around that culture, and people were very concerned when we converted the HOV lanes to express lanes in 95 that we were going to ruin slugging. And what they've actually realized since then is it's actually encouraging more carpooling. So slugging used to only happen during the HOV hours, which was 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Now people pick up after 9 a.m. We also had sometimes HOV congestion, and a lot of that has gone away now with the express lanes. And now because the express lanes go further south, there's now slug lines further south and express bus service further south. Like there didn't used to be OmniRide service into Stafford until the express lanes went into Stafford. And so there's a whole host of like changes that have happened kind of around this culture, but it is very organized, and they will weigh in if they think you're doing something that will disrupt kind of the system that they have set up. But they are also the big reason why in 66 outside the Beltway, we built 4,000 park and ride spots as a part of that project, is they said, hey, if you want slugging to work, and we want it to work, you have to provide us with the infrastructure to do that, because it used to be HOV2 on that corridor, and a lot of HOV2 is like you picking up your neighbor, right? But if you need to pick up 2 people, you need to have a pickup place to kind of achieve that. And so they encouraged, and the state said that's a good idea, us to put in place those park and ride lots along that corridor when we built out those express lanes to try and foster slugging on that corridor, because it wasn't as big there as it was in 95. Dr. Zimmerman.
I also do want to note, we do formally work to support smart, safe carpooling and van pooling as well, and that's something NVTA and VTC have been very supportive of. But you will see funding that we have for our commuter assistance programs, which as a state, we do work really closely with employers to make sure that they are aware of the array of things, both slugging as well as carpools, van pools, commuter benefits, kind of the array of things. And so all of these are sort of pieces of a puzzle that fit together, not just the different programs we have, but again, the partnerships that I think are really significant between the different levels of government, how we work together, and really working together closely with employers. Some of these are major employers like the Pentagon and the federal government and the commuter benefits that they provide, but also a lot of universities, other employers throughout the region. You might remember I mentioned, I think it was last month, Virginia received a national award as being the best commuter state in the country, and it is in part because of these partnerships that we have with the private sector, between the public sector, and with just normal folks who are offering it up to slug there. So just wanted to add that additional context. It's not all slugging. There's also some intentionality too.
Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Dunlop.
Yes, this is great. Of course, I love the idea of the slug lines. Organized chaos, we used to call it. It's great. But one of the points I wanted to make is I really think we need to come up with another way to say pay nothing or free, because that's not really accurate. It's directly accurate, but it's, the word that came to my mind is a decongestant. It's express lanes are a decongestant. In other words, the wealthy people are actually helping pay for other transportation projects or those express lanes. It might benefit them, but they're willing to pay a lot of money to do it. And it's not that users pay nothing, it's that they're not paying a direct payment. And I just think in a sense, if we came up, and I know there are really smart people who could do this, not me, but really smart people who could come up with different language. I think using different language would actually help people understand the dotted green line in Hampton Roads, as opposed to still being stuck in traffic. So I really just want to encourage you along those lines, because I think if we come up with language that helps people understand, this isn't going to solve all of our problems, and everybody's paying something. It's just that there's no direct payment here. So I really want to encourage that for the long term, to come up with language that really helps communicate what we're trying to accomplish here.
I think so. We have two sort of votes for more communication. I'm all for it. And I think the Hampton Roads rollouts over the next couple of years really give us an opportunity to do it well. I'll also say I have slugged hundreds of times, and happy to tell you about my experiences in the coffee break, all of which were good.
Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Smoot, Dr. Smoot.
I want to thank Ms. Schewel for an absolutely insightful and excellent presentation. This is a concept that may not have recognized its full potential in the Commonwealth. I think of I-81, which is one of our more expensive projects, and there is zero presence of express lanes on I-81, at least to my knowledge. I think I've driven the whole thing. Took me several days, but anyway. And as has been stated, this is optional. I mean, no one is forced to pay one of these tolls, if you will. My experience with them has been almost entirely going through Charlotte, North Carolina on I-77. And you're sitting there going nowhere, and here these people right over the wall, so to speak, going 70 miles an hour. And I'm saying to myself, get me to the first place I can pay the toll and get off of this thing and go somewhere. And it does benefit everyone who does not pay the toll, because it takes traffic off of the highway on an optional basis. So I think as we think about I-81 and other projects in the future, maybe we need to give more consideration to using express lanes where that makes sense. It don't make sense everywhere, obviously. But this has been very insightful. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I should also say it is my job to be the one talking, but this presentation was made by several people, including Secretary Donahue, many of the VDOT folk who are sitting in the back of the room, and our partners at our P3 partnerships who provided data. So thank you to all of them as well. All right, sometimes there is concerns about where the limited access points to get in and out of the express lanes will be. Sometimes communities want them, sometimes they don't want them. I think the key point is it has to be limited access to work. Those can be negotiated and usually are dictated by engineering constraints anyway. And then the last concern, which is I know has been coming up in Northern Virginia, is that people cheat. So right now, the way you would go into an express lane and designate that you are HOV and thus should not have to pay the direct fee is to switch the little clicker on your Easy Pass and move it on to HOV. There have been concerns and reports that people are cheating, they just lie and then don't pay anything. We do think that is happening. When I used to sell software, my head of sales said, you're not having good software unless someone's stealing it, right? That's how you know it's good. I think that's true here as well. But what we are doing and what our partners, our P3 partners are doing, are moving to more camera-based enforcement to verify if there are multiple people sitting in the vehicle. So there are ways to manage that.
And the other point I would just make on this is there are less cheaters now than when it was just HOV lanes only when we converted them. So like, for example, on 66 inside the Beltway, one of the reasons we explored converting those HOV lanes to express lanes is they were wildly congested during the HOV period. And so, I think one of the worst things we can do as government is provide what we're calling a carpool lane, encourage people to carpool and say, it's gonna be fast and reliable. And then you take the time to go pick someone else up and you merge onto the interstate to just see brake lights as far as the eye can see. That's not good. That means we ask people to take extra time to do something else because they were going to get a benefit, and then that benefit wasn't being realized. And the reason we were having that happen is there was massive amounts of people kind of cheating on I-66 inside the Beltway. I think at one point I saw estimates, it was like 40% of users. To put that in perspective, we could never get that many state police folks on that road to pull that many people over. It's just really hard to do. So while there is still cheating in these express lanes, it's dramatically lower than what we used to see in kind of the HOV only lanes. A lot of people who used to cheat are willing to pay the toll. Or other things to make the choices, or carpool, or do some other kind of, benefit. So I just wanted to note that this is an issue that we're working on, but it is still much better than what we used to see when we had carpool-only lanes.
I'll also say, and I should have mentioned this earlier, that several of the roads, especially up here, are managed by these long-term concessionaire partners, Transurban, for example. They are highly incentivized not to have cheaters, right? This is how they make their money, so they are also deploying appropriate camera-based enforcement, warning letters, et cetera, to drive down that problem.
A hefty fee. There's a hefty fee.
Sometimes I think you get the first one for free because maybe you just left it on by mistake, but then yes, a hefty fee.
Yeah, you get a nice little fee.
Not that anyone here has
We can
experienced
provide
it.
some information on how the
No, I'm
toll
the
enforcement program works. I would just note it's a statutorily established program with parameters enacted by the General Assembly.
Yes.
So I'm the opposite. I'm the one who picks up slugs and still pays the toll because I forgot to switch it. But
yes, that also
there's-
happens.
Yes, so
Go both ways.
I think you should get credit for that in some way.
I will let Transurban know about your idea. All right, those are the main points we wanted to make.
Well, thank you
Other
very
questions?
much. Ms. Shule, Mr. Minshew?
Thank you, Secretary. Great presentation, Ms. Shule. I'm curious, with the dynamic pricing, where the numbers change pretty fast based upon traffic flows, that's a great petri dish to study the price elasticity of demand. Where an inelastic good, demand goes up, but price doesn't change. We're elastic, as price goes up, demand drops. I'm curious, have we found that drivers who pay the toll through the pricing, is the right to drive on that toll road an inelastic good or elastic? In other words, does demand drop off as the price shoots up?
Yes, but not for everyone. And I think, Commissioner Britch, you might have more details.
Mr. Minshew, I'd say that, yes, we watch demand drop, and that's one of the features that we have to be able to maintain at least 45 miles an hour on that network. And we will take that up as high as needed to be able to maintain that speed. And that's just a factor of the number of vehicles in the lanes, the density of the traffic, and the number of vehicles moving through to be able to manage that. I will say that the Hampton Roads region is more price sensitive than what we see in Northern Virginia. Northern Virginia is more tolerant of higher tolls to a point. Hampton Roads will go from 60 cents on the reversible roadway today to $2, $3, and we will watch the drop off precipitously. When it gets above 10, you're going to watch something else happen. But what we're finding is, just as in Northern Virginia, as that price increases, people get into the lane because they know that the general purpose lanes are filled or there's a backup to get around that backup. So what we're seeing is people, their driving behavior, seeing that there's a reliable trip that's guaranteed to them, they're willing to pay that toll maybe between those two exits to be able to get around the congestion that exists. So there is price sensitivity, but there's also a behavior that I'm going to pay that toll because I need to be there, as the secretary said. This is not 7 days a week or 5 days a week on the commuting pattern. It is, I'm going to use it when I need to and get in there. But yes, price sensitivity is
Interesting. Thank you.
being.
There's a famous study on one of the earlier express lanes in Florida about that U shape of the price sensitivity that was a big deal when it came out. And the other interesting thing from an economics perspective is that there is ample opportunity to study it. We have huge amounts of data. Transurban has huge amounts of data, and it's one of the few prices where you can see it as you make the decision. A lot of other prices are sort of buried, or you don't, the time between the information being clear and the reaction is sort of unique in this case. So it's a very well-studied concept, not just by transportation people, but by economics people as well, because of that characteristic.
Well, and just to state the obvious, if there wasn't an effective price, the general purpose lanes and express lanes would be the same. And so, like, just on that very basic point, because the express lanes are managed to not become congested, that indicates at some level it works. I think the question is it's different in probably different parts of the corridor. It's different probably at different times of the day, and it's certainly different in different parts of the state. And that's just the uniqueness of a whole host of characteristics, right, that influence the decision-making of people. Mr. Stant and then Mr. Lawson.
It's a question for the commissioner, but Hampton Roads has no buses like they have up here. They have no slugging like they have up here. So basically, half of this presentation is attempting to show that up in Northern Virginia, it works because you got buses, you got slugging, you got really carpools, but in Hampton Roads, we don't have that. So what is VDOT thinking about the success of those express lanes in Hampton Roads? I don't know the answer to that question.
Mr. Secretary, if I might, as we develop those express lanes, starting from Jefferson Avenue down to Bowers Hill, part of that commitment was working with the region to be able to identify bus service that does not exist today. So you're absolutely right that the service that exists today would only be sitting in traffic between, South Side has the first set of roughly 20 miles of express lanes. That is the phase one, if you will, of the express lane network. All the work hinges on the opening of the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel project to be able to provide a reliable service that does not exist today between the peninsula and the South Side. So it is working in tandem with the region to be able to identify, and Department of Rail and Public Transportation, to identify the available bus service that can be implemented to be able to achieve the goals and objectives that this region is fixed. But the first thing that we have to do is open up the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, which is the region's worst bottleneck.
So I think what I'm going to add a little more into what the commissioner is saying is what happened in Northern Virginia didn't happen overnight. It took a lot of time, effort, and planning, and we're going to have to do the same thing in Hampton Roads as this moves forward. You know, 10 years ago, a lot of legislators, as we were talking about this concept in Hampton Roads, would say, well, I'm not sure about all this. You know, when we put in the carpool lanes in Hampton Roads, carpooling went down. Well, if you looked at where the carpool lanes were, they were everywhere there wasn't really bad traffic. And so there was carpool lanes on 64 in the peninsula, and then as you approached the HWT, they went away. And then when you got down, you know, on the south side there between 564 and 264, where traffic, you know, there's a little bit more there, but it wasn't as bad, there were carpool lanes again. And then as you moved around to 464, there were carpool lanes. But as you went to the high-rise bridge where traffic got really bad again, the carpool lanes kind of went away. And so what we're doing now in Hampton Roads is actually adding in the most important pieces of the network, which are also the most expensive ones, right? That's why they didn't exist until we had the regional authority in that region, because we had no ability to finance those projects. And so now what we have to do is, now that we're going to have that actual regional connectivity, is to figure out how do we maximize it. And so I think, to the commissioner's point, we have a lot of work ahead of us in Hampton Roads to be able to do that, because at the end of the day, we're eventually going to run out of the ability to keep widening roads in certain locations. So that means we have to figure out how to move more people on the existing asphalt that we have. And my takeaway from this is that with a lot of commitment and funding, we can move more people in the space so that we can keep growing as a region and as a state, but it means we have to really put in that time and effort. And we've seen that bear fruit up here in Northern Virginia, and now we're going to need to do the work in Hampton Roads to see it bear fruit down there, but I want to be clear, it's not going to happen overnight. It is going to take time, it's going to take effort, it's going to take commitments. We'll probably find things that work. Let me say the other part, we'll probably find some things that don't work as well. But the important thing is that we recognize that, acknowledge that, and keep finding things that do work and moving on from those that don't. And I think Director Zimmerman had some comments.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I was also just going to remind the CTB that the General Assembly did pass language to require SJ 28 for the Hampton roads, which will be a study to look at the regional transit needs. And so that will be hopefully kicking off, or I shouldn't say they passed it, it's part of the budget language, so we are waiting to see what will happen with all of that. But regional partners are kind of gearing up and getting ready. That's similar to the SB 28 that we had up here in Northern Virginia that fed into the DMV moves. There could be something similar for the Hampton Roads area to really kind of present what is that regional transit vision that can work in tandem with the new express lanes and the other infrastructure investments are happening. So hopefully that will get kicked off here this summer and will give us some additional insights going forward.
Thank you, Director Zimmerman.
Mr. Secretary,
Mr. Lawson.
are the dynamic pricing in dollars set by contract, or they're just purely fluid?
Mr. Lawson, there's a requirement for performance. And so what we are asking for is that when we are telling people who have again made the decision to ride the bus or to carpool that they're going to get a fast and reliable trip, we have contractual provisions that hold the concessionaires responsible for delivering on that level of service.
And I maybe didn't ask it properly. So there is no cap in dollars as to the maximum. It's purely math based on congestion?
It's a performance-based contract. What I would say, to the point Mr. Minshew was getting at earlier, is there is a financial incentive for the operators to not just raise it to, like, I don't know what a level would be, but if you go too high, you're effectively going to discourage folks from using it, and then that would put at risk their investments and the bonds that are issued on those facilities. And so what an operator is looking for is what is the sweet spot in pricing in terms of hitting the level of performance and encouraging use both by those who carpool and bus, but also by those who make that choice to use the toll.
And just generally, I assume we did a forecast of what we anticipate revenues to be, and I'm guessing that in Northern Virginia, they probably exceeded expectations. Are we yielding higher revenues? Are we seeing higher revenues?
So, and I think we probably need, this is just flagging for me, we need a presentation maybe on the P3 process and how that works as we potentially consider some of those projects in the Commonwealth. But I want to assure the board and anyone listening online that as a part of any process involving a toll road or a financial transaction of this nature, the Commonwealth always undertakes its own financial analysis and projections, and we will only enter into agreements with private companies when they have demonstrated, one, they can meet the terms that we have set, because again, we have the fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayer, and so we will say what is the appropriate project after engagement with the public. We will then analyze what we think can be financed from that project, and the private partner only gets the opportunity to enter into agreement with the state if they can provide a deal that beats what the Commonwealth can otherwise provide for itself. That was a big part of some reforms that were enacted or first implemented on the I-66 outside the Beltway P3 project, and then were later codified into law in the 2017 session as a kind of a bill between the House and Senate with the support of the then administration. Still up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'm curious about the tax implications of the employer providing a chit to the employee to encourage carpooling and use of the buses, the implications to the rider of receiving such, the concept of, what are the goals of the Commonwealth with respect to the tax applications of these kinds of things?
So most of the tax applications for commuter services are at the federal level. And so there's something in the federal IRS code, and please don't ask me which section because I do not know, but it's called the commuter benefit. And so there's a maximum amount that is, I think, now actually indexed to inflation that people can get for both parking and or transit service, and I think they actually added bike share a few years ago, but maybe at a slightly lower amount. It's around $250 a month, and that is essentially a pre-tax benefit. And so the employer can provide it to their employees, and they then don't have to pay payroll taxes on it, or an employee is allowed to set it aside from their wages and not have to pay income or payroll taxes on those. Again, those are employer kind of based decisions, but the tax policy is federal tax policy. I don't believe we have any state tax policy, but I'm looking over. Okay, yeah, no on that. I think when Director Zimmerman talked about that earlier, what we do is we provide kind of seed funding to help employers provide information to their employees and other things of that nature. And so we are not involved in any kind of ongoing tax policy. We're more involved in the standing up these types of programs to provide educational materials to help people understand how to use them and where they exist and how to, to avail themselves of it. Last call for questions for Ms. Schul. Well, thank you very much. All right, folks, just a time check here. We have 1 hour left before we are going to be breaking for the day. That's also a reminder for those in the audience. There's 1 hour left before we're breaking the day. When we break, we will be recommencing tomorrow at 11 a.m. and starting with public comment. We have several presentations now by Mr. Cole, so I'm going to call him up, and his first presentation is on the Integrated Directional Sign Program. This is a two-part presentation, starting with an overview and then a discussion of some regulatory changes, and that regulation is a regulation of this board. So you will have to, I believe, vote on that at next month's meeting. Mr. Cole.
Good morning, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. I'm Mark Cole with VDOT's Traffic Operations Division, and happy to be here today with my friend Joshua Hesslinga from our Gala division, and to talk to you about the Integrated Directional Signing Program, which we refer to as the IDSP. First, we're going to do an overview of the IDSP. It's our statewide framework for managing multiple types of directional signing across the state under a single model. This includes 4 major sign programs and 7 special sign programs. It involves over 6,000 customers and over 15,000 signs. For this to work, we need several things to complement one another. The first thing is statutory authority. There are several state statutes that give the board the authority to regulate signs and to impose fees and to establish regulations for overseeing the program. We rely on the board to set that regulatory framework. We also have an advisory committee that's made up of a number of stakeholders who participate in the program as well. They review and make recommendations on policies and procedures to make sure everything's running smoothly. And for some of our programs, especially the special sign programs, General Assembly has adopted various statutes that have created some of the programs that we help to manage. At central office, VDOT is responsible for managing this program statewide, the day-to-day administration, and also working with our contractor to make sure everything's maintained, installed in a satisfactory manner. So why does the IDSP matter? Well, the IDSP provides a support to our travelers to help them get to where they want to go safely. It also ensures consistency across the state and compliance with our state and national standards like the Virginia MUTCD, which the board adopted the update last year. And it supports economic development and tourism. The first of the 4 major sign programs is the specific travel services or logo signs. These are the blue signs I'm certain you're familiar with various businesses or attractions that are listed on the signs. We have over 3,000 customers who participate in this program, over 12,600 of the individual plates on 4,400 plus structures, and over 400 interchanges The fee to participate in this program ranges from $800 to $1,000 a year, and it's based on the traffic volume of the road or the interstate where the sign is located. We also have the tourist-oriented directional signing program, so off the interstate system. These signs provide motorists with directional guidance to business and services on those non-interstate roadways. The applicants pay an application fee as well as an annual fee of $450 for each sign panel. We have over 500 customers, 1,300 plus panels, and over 1,000 structures in the TODS program. The Supplemental Guide Sign Program gives directional guidance for cultural, historical, and similar destinations on VDOT right-of-way, such as parks, government sites, universities, and the like. The fees are paid by commercial entities that participate in the program, but there's no fee for government and nonprofit customers. And these fees range from $250 to $700 a year based on the size of the sign. Also for this program, the requester of the sign is responsible for the ongoing maintenance of the sign. So here are the three different kinds of supplemental guide signs. We have brown background signs that are more recreational and cultural. The green signs, which are governmental organizations, and then the blue signs, which are more information and service related. The fourth major sign program is the general motorist service signs. These provide guidance to motorists on all kinds of roadways using symbols. The participant pays for fabrication installation cost, and maintenance is covered by VDOT. This program has over 1,500 messages and 1,300 structures as of today. There are 7 special signing programs that I mentioned at the beginning. One of those that's most well known is the Historical Marker Program. This has been in Virginia for about 100 years, since 1926, and is a partnership between VDOT and the Department of Historic Resources. The Department of Historic Resources manages the applications for the markers and approves the message that is included on the marker. And then VDOT is responsible for the installation and maintenance cost of the markers that are placed in VDOT's right-of-way. As of 2020, when we began the partnership with Department of Historic Resources, there were over 2,900 of these structures across the state. Here are the other 7 special signing programs, some of which were, as I mentioned, they came about as a result of action of the General Assembly. But for all of these, we work with the requester, the organization, for installation and maintenance of these signs. In addition, the IDSP program also works in partnership with localities to help with community gateway and wayfinding signs. So we do this through our permit process. So when these signs are requested on VDOT right-of-way, we coordinate with the requester to make sure that the signs meet all of the MUTCD requirements and other inconsistency requirements, and support them through that permitting process. So the program is administered through a contract. We have a contractor who runs the program for us in partnership with central office staff. We administer it per the board's criteria and the MUTCD. We oversee the finances, the contract, the compliance. Our district offices work locally with the requesters on specific approvals and compliance, and help and support the field implementation of getting the signs installed and then maintained. That IDSP contractor manages the day-to-day program delivery as a whole, serves as the primary point of contact for customers, and performs the sign installation, maintenance, and inspection. We also have an IDSP management system that is GIS-based that helps us track the location and age of the signs, the process, and the status of installation and maintenance. And this helps us a lot with our transparency and accountability with one another, and helps us to ensure a data-driven contract that meets all the goals and objectives of the customers. So before I turn it over to Josh, are there any questions about the sign program as a whole?
Lawson.
Just curious, are the fees set by us, by the CTB?
Mr. Secretary, Mr. Lawson, yes, the fees are outlined in the regulation.
How do we know that I get the install and all that, that's just a pass-through, but for the commercial folks that pay, how do we know that that's a competitive rate or an appropriate rate to charge? And when was it last set or reset?
Mr. Secretary, Mr. Lawson, periodically we do look at those numbers. The IDSP program spends what it takes in, and it's limited by how much it can keep in reserve. And so we continually monitor the quantity that we have coming in, the rates that we're charging, and then they have to be updated, when we update the regulation. So it's been some time since those rates have been adjusted.
When were they, I'm just curious, when were they last set?
Ms. Lawson, there's a different point I would like to make, which may get to the core of what I think you're driving at here. So just as a quick reminder, similar to the user fee concept earlier in tax versus user fee, because the authority to set this fee has been provided by the General Assembly to this body, you're not elected, you're appointed. So that means the fee can effectively cover the cost of the program. So this is not a market-based type of fee that we set here. That is why people have strong feelings, I'll call it, about the policy and other things, because there's a limited amount of space on that sign, and because the fee isn't market-based, you get certain interesting outcomes at times based on it. And so that's why a lot of the participating businesses and attractions care deeply about the policy, because the price does not serve as of factors at times as to whether or not you choose to stay on a sign in certain circumstances, if you're following me.
So we back into a number then. We determine what it costs to run this, and then that will dictate what we can charge the commercial sector.
Mr. Secretary, you're right, Mr. Lawson. In essence, we back into it. The regulations and the dollar amounts that we charge our customers for this is set at a stage that covers the cost of the contract, our staff time. There is a provision in the code that only allows a certain, I think, 10% mark, I think, okay, I see head shaking, that the revenue in any given year cannot exceed 10% of the net cost in it. So there is a cap that we're afforded an ability to generate revenue off of this, but that is, and that those monies serve as our ability to be able to cover cost, unknown issues that may come up during the calendar year, but we are capped on any given year of about 10% of the revenue coming in.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Cole? Mr. Minshew?
Dr. Mr. Cole, I'm curious, one bit of signage that we have on our secondary roads that doesn't appear to be mentioned are those, I guess you call them memorial signs, that the family of a person who died at a traffic accident. We seem to see them on secondary roads, not really on primaries or limited access roads, but I'm curious, does that fit under the IDSP matrix, or is that a kind of separate offline permitting program?
Mr. Secretary, Mr. Minshew, that's not under the IDSP. It's a separate program that's permitted.
Questions? All right, let's move into the regulatory review.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. I'll take just a couple minutes of your time to talk about the exciting subject of periodic regulatory reviews. The IDSP regulations really are the backbone of the program. They establish the framework for how the program operates, defines eligibility requirements, program terminology, fee structures, obviously, and operational rules. The example given there is bumping. Looked up what bumping is, and that's when one business replaces another business on those logo signs. So makes sense. The history of this is the regulation was adopted in 2006, and it hasn't really been updated since. The last periodic review that it got was in 2021, which is consistent with the general framework of you review these things every 4 or so years. So we're doing that under the framework of the Administrative Process Act. And part of what it envisions as part of the periodic review is to ensure that the regulations do still achieve their purposes of protecting the public health, safety, and welfare, that they're clearly written and easily understandable, and so forth. Each governor establishes the further details of regulatory procedures in an executive order by June 30th of the year that they take office, so that is coming up. Some of the procedures, the specific procedures that we go through may change. The general framework will not. In this case, the periodic review began for IDSP in September of 2025 when a notice was posted. There was a 21-day comment period. No public comments were received. The result recommended is to amend the regulation, and I'm going to hand this over back to Mark to talk a little bit about the substance of the amendments that are happening this time as a result of the review.
As Josh mentioned, we went through the regulatory review. There are no fundamental changes to the program or purpose in the document. We had quite a number of changes to improve the clarity. We also updated a number of definitions in the document. We also proposed a change to allow the relocation of grandfathered supplemental guide signs. This gives some added flexibility. So for supplemental guide signs that were in place before 2004, when the IDSP program was established, those signs are grandfathered and allowed to remain. This would allow relocation to occur for those signs if the location moves from where they are today. But it does limit that relocation on limited access highways to signs that were already on the limited access highway. In addition, we added a section to the regulation to cover alternative fueling. We worked with the Virginia Department of Energy to do this, and it sets the requirements for businesses wanting to display a message for EV charging or alternative fuels. Lastly, we had some changes, in particular with alternative fueling updates to make sure that we meet the requirements of the manual for uniform traffic control devices. We also had some limited expansion of eligibility for signs under the logo, TODS, and supplemental guide sign programs. In your packet, you can see what those changes are because one of the attachments includes all of what's being proposed. We also have a $250 application fee for General Motors Services signs. And this is to offset the administrative cost related to those signs and getting those in the right locations when requested. Also, we had some updated information for the special programs just to make sure that the regulation matches the current practice and improves the understandability of those programs by adding some definitions as well.
Just a little bit more on the process in this particular case. Your standard regulatory process is 3 stages. You post a notice, you get public comments. You post your proposed text, you get public comments. You post your final text, you get public comments. This is an exempt regulatory process, so that makes it a little bit shorter. You don't do the whole 3 steps. You still get Attorney General's office review, Governor's office reviews. It still gets published in the Virginia Register. You still get a 30-day public comment period at that point. And it is normally these regulations are effective at the conclusion of that public comment period. And in this particular case, the next steps are for this board to consider over the next month or so. The amendments, the text of which, as Mark mentioned, are in your packet, along with some of the regulatory documents. Next month, you'll be asked to approve the amendments to the regulation. That finishes the periodic review process, and then the VDOT staff will go through the specific steps that I outlined a moment ago.
Thank you both. Are there any questions about the IDSP program or the update to the regulation? All right. Well, so folks, it's 11:20. My goal is, or hope, is to get through at least 2 more of these presentations today before we break. So just noting that and sending signals to the presenters as they come up. So next we have Mr. Cole and Ms. Ray talking about transportation safety performance measures. I just want to flag as they're getting set up, we've been having a lot of discussions about safety. What we are doing here does not yet reflect kind of the effects of where we're hoping to go with some of those discussions. So this is kind of a status quo type of update based on where things have been. When we move forward with a new investment strategy later this year, in the future, you'll see that reflected in this kind of decision-making process, but it's not yet incorporated, as you haven't adopted anything yet. That's right.
Mr. Secretary, members of the board, good morning. Yes, I will be brief. Another tag team presentation, though. Let's see, so first of all, I just want to give a little bit of background today on some of the federal requirements related to target setting and performance reporting that we have to do, and then the requirements that we have to do for the safety targets and how we set those targets, and then coming back to you in June for establishing those, adopting those targets, given any feedback. But there are requirements that we have when we look at federal target setting. And so just today, this is the agenda that we've got here, looking at some of the trends that we see with the safety targets. Again, the target setting approaches that we've considered, some of you all have heard on an annual basis that we come back and we talk about a model and things like that, and we'll give you some information about that, and then what those final proposed targets are. But why are we here for the safety targets? Well, MAP 21, federal law, established performance targets and performance reporting for several different areas. One is safety, which we're talking about today. One is infrastructure condition relating to bridges and pavement performance. And one is called system performance, and that gets us into some congestion and reliability and air quality measures. And they're all in different cycles, though. But also we have Code of Virginia requirements that said you all will adopt those targets for those federal performance measures. So right now we're looking at the targets today and needing to adopt those targets in June to meet certain requirements that Mr. Cole will go through. And then also we have a requirement, and I'll be back in July to talk about the other 2 performance areas with our infrastructure condition and our system performance measures, with those needing to be adopted by September of this year. So now I'll turn it over to Mark.
Mr. Cole.
Thank you, Margie, and Mr. Secretary, members of the board. Once we get to talking about traffic safety performance targets, federal law requires performance targets for safety, and there are 5 measures that we'll talk about. We have to set those annually for the next calendar year. So we'll be talking today about targets for 2027. We also are required to work at our friends at the Department of Motor Vehicles Highway Safety Office to coordinate on 3 of the performance measures. Department of Motor Vehicles will then report the targets to NHTSA by June 30th, which makes it important that we work with you to approve the targets by next month. And then VDOT will report the targets to Federal Highway every August the 31st.
Guys, I just want to stress, you had different federal agencies create slightly different reporting guidelines for the exact same measure. So that's why we're bringing this to you now. what we submit in August is going to be the same as whatever you approve in June. That's going to go to NHTSA. So FHWA and NHTSA get the same thing. They are aware that we think the deadline should be the same. They've thanked us for our comments. They remain where they are. But so just that's kind of why we have those there. Again, it's just the way the system works. And I think the federal regulatory process is a little more difficult than the state regulatory process. And so I'm not sure that's going to change anytime soon, but just wanted to flag what you approve in June goes to both agencies. We're not coming back with a new one before August.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Here are the 5 safety performance federal measures that we have to set. The number of fatalities, the rate of fatalities, and the number of serious injuries are the 3 of the 5 that we have to match with what DMV will turn into NHTSA at the end of June. VDOT also has to set a rate of serious injury target and the number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, which is a combination of the bicyclists and pedestrians who died or had suspected serious injury in crashes. In addition to submitting an annual target, we also have to calculate the 5-year average targets. The 2021 federal bill requires us to set the targets in a way that it demonstrates that we're either level or have an improved performance. So in other words, we want our safety numbers to get better, to not get worse. And the 2027 targets that we're going to talk about today, we will average those with the preceding 4 years and then make sure that number is level when compared with the most recent 5-year average. The baseline for that calculation is the data between 2021 and 25. For 2027, we'll have 3 years of actual performance data through 2025. Then we'll use a projection for this year and then the proposed 2027 target to come up with the information we need. In recent presentations, you've seen the trend of fatalities and serious injuries over the past 20 years in Virginia. Here you can see that our 5-year average through 2025 was 927 fatalities and almost 7,200 serious injuries. Once you have that number, we then do a calculation to determine the fatality and serious injury 5, or 825 compared to the target of 819. Our serious injuries were a bit lower than the target value, 6,600 versus 6,800. And you can see the non-motorized, we were a bit higher at 722 in 2025 versus the 619 target. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the target values for this year. These were set by the board last June.
And Mark, just really quick, back on that slide, or Mr. Cole, excuse me, the discrepancy in the change in fatalities versus fatality rate is we had an assumed increase in vehicle miles traveled so driving actually increased less year over year, because if I look at fatalities, it looks like we're under 1% in the difference, where in fatality rates, it looks like we're a few percentage points difference. Is that the variable?
That is correct. I believe that was the change in the estimated vehicle miles traveled.
All right, thank you.
So as we have done in previous years since 2017, when we started being required to set the safety performance targets, we have followed a couple of methods to arrive at a recommended target number. The first approach was to predict the annual target using an analytical model that we've used in previous years. So we have a robust model that we've assembled since 2017 that looks at things like traffic volume, investment in road projects and resurfacing to predict how the safety numbers might change. We also this year did a projection of values, a more simple projection to see what that result would look like. And then we've made some recommendations based on those two methods. For the first approach, which is the model prediction, we calculate the future target year fatalities for 2027 serious injuries using the model that considers a number of external influencing factors and that we adjust annually. Once we have the model output of an annual number, we then reduce that number by the expected benefits from our smart scale and safety projects that will be ending prior to 2027. So we take the model prediction number, we subtract the number of lives or injuries we expect to save with those project benefits to get the final recommended number. And then once we have the numbers for fatalities, serious injuries, we can calculate the two rates using the estimated vehicle miles traveled for 2027.
Sellers.
For those external factors, are those just related to the road condition?
Things like liquor licenses that were administered. There's a variety of factors that have a downstream effect on highway safety, and would be happy to provide more detail on that if you like. Some of the factors tend to drive the numbers and make them worse, and some of them actually help, like spending on infrastructure helps bring the numbers down.
Ms. Sellers, it most certainly includes things beyond roadway conditions. So age of vehicles, liquor licenses, as Mr. Cole noted, there's a variety of factors that go beyond just the roadway condition that are taken into account.
So are we doing a similar type of study on the human behavior side to look at, historically who these 800 people are and seeing if we can predict who the future 800 people are that are going to kill themselves on roads?
I would say at the moment the model does not take that into account. I would also say there are probably opportunities to enhance the model, and I think that's something we'll be looking at in the coming years, but at the moment it does not take that into account.
Kind of an outlier variable out there. Okay. Thanks.
Great, thank you. The second approach that I mentioned is looking at the last few years and then doing a simple projected line to the future to 2027 to see what that would result in. So we use the crashes to date in 2026 and then projected what we thought that would look like by the end of the year. And then set the 2027 targets based on annual average reductions between 2024 and 2026. And then once we have that 2027 target number, just like with the model method, we use the estimated VMT to calculate the rate. And for this year, the expected growth in the VMT is 1% growth year to year. So here we show the two methods. So the top two charts are the model results. The bottom two charts are the projection method. So you can see on the left-hand side of the screen is the annual number of fatalities, and then on the right side is the 5-year average associated with that. So if you focus on the model prediction, which is the upper left chart, what we did with the model is we ran a high level model and a low level model based on the variance in expected variance in the variables. And so right in the middle of those two model runs is a number of 765 fatalities in 2027 that we are expecting. And so the 5-year average, then we just do the math on the right-hand side of the screen to get to a 5-year average number of deaths of 837. On the bottom half of the screen where we did the projection, we're looking at the trend from 2024 through 2026, what we estimate we'll be at in 2026. To then see what would happen if that trend continues until 2027. So this is more of a straight line projection. However, that result was 663 estimated deaths in 2027. which is about 100 less than the model prediction. But we also, if you take a step back, we've just come through the COVID pandemic situation with increasing crashes and deaths, and we are settling out definitely towards something that resembles more of where we were pre-pandemic. But we're not confident that the trend we've seen since 2024 is going to continue to 2027. We have more experience with the model that gives us comfort that that model prediction is closer to a reasonable number that we can achieve for 2027. So once you get your fatality target number that we just talked about, the rates are then calculated using the VMT. And so for the rate in 2027, for the model prediction, it's a decrease of 9% compared to the projection method, which was at 21%. For serious injuries, the model predicted a high and a low range, and the midpoint of those ranges is 6,285 serious injuries in the year 2027. And the projection method on the bottom, if you continued the straight line, would put you at about 5,467. And for the same reason that we talked about with the fatality target, we're recommending the model method for both of these targets, for both the fatality rate, and serious injury. And serious injury rate, which is shown here. So when you do the math, considering the VMT, the serious injury rate target that we would recommend is a decrease of 7% in 2027 for a value of 6.9. As compared to the other method we looked at, which was the projection, which would have been about a 19% decrease. Finally, for the non-motorized target, which again is bicyclists and pedestrians, based on the model values at the top, we recommend a 2027 target of 682. And that compares to 551 in 2027 if you were to use the projection method. So this slide summarizes the proposed 2027 annual federal safety targets. If you start on the left, you can see what the actual values in 2025 were, then the 2026 target. The 2026 projection is simply that. It's a projection of what we think 2026 will look like based on what's happened so far in 2026. Then the proposed 2027 target values column that we just talked about with 765 fatalities, 6,285 serious injuries, and 682 non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. Then you can see the percent change from 2025, and then we check to make sure that those targets, and you can see this in the charts, of course, but all of those would be headed in the positive direction, which is a requirement of the target setting. So the next steps would be at the June meeting, we'll be coming to ask the board to adopt the proposed 2027 targets, and like previous years, we'll have a resolution and other packet of information to that effect.
Thank you, Mr. Kohler. Any questions? Mr. Coleman?
Thank you, Secretary. Thank you for a great presentation, and I'm very pleased that we're seeing some sincere effort to use analytics to come up with matrix to measure the effectiveness of the I call them goals, you call them targets, same thing. But are you able to use AI in any of these processes? And if so, how?
Mr. Secretary, Mr. Coleman, we haven't yet. This model that we talked about today, we actually developed back in 2017 when the federal requirements started asking us to do the targets. And we haven't incorporated AI yet, but I think that's something that we'll definitely be putting an eye on in the future.
Any other questions for Mr. Cole? Ms. Dunlop?
Yes, thank you, too, for Mr. Secretary. Thank you also for a good presentation. Of course, I'm very uncomfortable with the word targets, but I suppose that's a federal mandate. They want us to target these as opposed to expectations. Very, very shocking language here. Is this broken down by district in Virginia where these, let's say, fatalities occur, and then broken down by whether it's a work area or a not work area, if it's speed or if it's human behavior? I mean, do we have that information all included?
Mr. Secretary, Ms. Dunlop, we do have all that information included. It's a limited version of that information that informs the model, but we definitely look at the district level, how the various factors are changing across the state based on where you are. And after these, aside from these targets being set, we have a whole parallel work effort that digs more deeply into the data to understand all the factors that you mentioned.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Next, I was informed by the commissioner that we actually have the Stanton District Engineer here for agenda item number 9. He was not planning to be here tomorrow, so we're actually going to jump to that item really quick. This is the smart scale budget increase that you all will be considering at your June meeting for the Exit 317 improvements. Ms. Pryor?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. I am not the Stanton District Engineer. Mr. Joel D'Annunzio is sitting here behind me, and he will be able to help answer any questions. Today I'm going to talk to you about a proposed budget increase in the Stanton District for the I-81 Exit 317 Interchange Improvement Project. By way of reminder, the board's smart scale policy requires board action to approve a budget increase above certain thresholds, as shown on the slide. The I-81 Exit 317 Interchange Improvement Project was submitted by the Winfred MPO in round 5 of smart scale. The original project cost was $37 million. The smart scale request was $31 million. The difference was provided by Frederick County. The request was funded with high priority funds. The original scope included reconfiguration of the existing Diamond interchange, as well as the construction of a park and ride lot. VDOT is administering the project, and we are preparing for design build procurement now. The benefits of the project were primarily due to safety, environment, and economic development. The project required an interchange access report to be completed concurrent with the initial design. I do want to point out that as part of round 5, an IAR was not required as part of the readiness standards. That has since changed, and projects that were submitted in subsequent rounds or in the future would have to have an IAR underway. As part of that IAR process that was initiated after this project was selected, some operational issues were identified at 2 intersections adjacent to the new interchange. And it was determined that the termini needed to be extended in order to achieve the operational and safety benefits assumed in the original application. Some modifications to the proposed parking lot were also required. As a result, the project has increased some cost increases across all phases, primarily limited to, due to increased design cost, additional right-of-way and utility impacts, and additional bid item quantities due to the extension of the termini. I do want to point out that this project is being procured as part of a bundle of projects near I-81 or on I-81. It includes this project as well as the I-81 widening between exits 317 and 319. The total bundle is valued at $340 million and is scheduled to be released for RFQ in July. This just shows a snapshot of the details related to the project. Again, the total cost at submission was $37 million. It was funded with high priority funds as well as local funds. The score was 7.52 and it ranked 12 out of 19. With the proposed budget increase, the cost increase, or the cost now, is estimated at just under $47 million. This represents a cost increase of $9.4 million. So the project would have a total high priority budget of $40 million, as well as the local funds from Frederick County of $6.5 million. The revised score would be 5.78, and the project would drop in rank one place to be 13 out of 19. To date, we've spent about $1.5 million on the project. So I will bring a recommendation for your approval at the June meeting to approve this proposed budget increase of $9 million. Currently, there is $45.5 million in the high priority deallocation balance entry. As a reminder, that deallocation balance entry holds surplus allocations from previously selected high priority projects for use in instances like this to cover cost increases on previously selected high priority projects. So after this proposed transfer, if approved, the total remaining balance in that balance entry would be $36 million. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Pryor. Any questions? Mr. Griffin?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Ms. Pryor, just helping put all this in context, do we normally, if projects run over, actually, let me take a step back. These funds, if not spent on this, would be allocated where?
They would continue to roll over and be available for high priority project budget increases on previously selected projects. If and when the balance grows to be excessive, we have in the past allocated some of those dollars in a subsequent round to help support additional selections.
But we don't have a fixed level of, once we get to a certain point, they roll over.
No, and I wouldn't consider this to be an excessive amount at this point.
Okay, and I mean, the reason I ask is the NVTA went through this same challenge of what do we do when we allocate funds to a project and the project comes back and says we need more funds, and we decided you can't get any more funds. Like you set a number and you're going to need to live by that number. My understanding is that our policy with the CTB is different, that we're a little bit more friendlier in terms of historically cost overruns, and if so, does that create kind of a misalignment of incentives for initially pricing projects?
Ms. Pryor, if I could jump in. So, Mr. Griffin, I would, just to be very clear about the board's choices, you have agency in this vote in June. You can choose to say yes, and then they will receive the funds, and you can choose to say no, and that creates a cascading set of other follow-on decisions, which could include additional funding from the local government, may not. It could include the project being canceled, kind of moving forward. So I want to be clear, like the policy is that the board gets to pick as to what to do there. I do want to note that in the original structure, which does not need to be the ongoing structure, is we never thought we would get everything right. And so the hope was that we would have some that came in under and some that came in over. The funding we have here is demonstrating that to date, we've had more come in under than over, which is why these funds exist. So these are all previously awarded funds. This wouldn't reduce any money for the future round of Smart Scale there, which does not mean what you need to do in June, just noting kind of that kind of intent and concept there. The one thing I would say that I think is slightly different though than what you were noting about the NVTA project is Kim called it the interchange access report, which makes it sound like this nice little benign report. It's a pretty serious thing with the Federal Highway Administration, and I think what we've noted is, and this has been corrected, is that should have been done before this project was ever picked for funding, because it sounds like this nice little report that we do for fun, but it's pretty serious, and so the feds aren't going to let us do the interchange modification without those other enhancements. And so I certainly think it is fair to say that that was a discrepancy in the policy that let that project move forward without that kind of due diligence done there. And so all I'm trying to say is it's not as if we estimated to build X would cost 30 and now building X cost 40. It's now we're building X plus Y and Y just cost more.
Okay, well, that's very helpful. But I think overall, there's a policy question of how big we want the reserve account to be.
That's fair.
And under what conditions will we allow applicants to dip into it? That's the only point. I'm not having any objection to this project at all.
That is very fair.
Secretary.
Mr. Lawson.
it's a great report and a great clarification from the Secretary. This is a project that's been on the books for years, and it's been trying to go forward. And it's our attempt to keep up with Northern Virginia. This intersection, you can go there right now and it's backed up. And it's because it's a confluence of two industrial parks, Route 11, I-81. And the answer is we not only need to approve this, but we need to build this yesterday.
Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Sellers, I'm sorry, Ms. Sellers.
So my question is maybe related to both, but this is part of the I-81 bigger plan. And so what is the benefit of using cash in this instance versus adding $9 million to, you know, a $3 billion?
Sure. Just to clarify, this project is not part of the I-81 Corridor Improvement Program. It is bundled for procurement purposes with a project that is part of the I-81 Corridor Improvement Program. Two separate pots of money, so we can't use I-81 money to cover this cost increase any more than we could use smart scale money to cover a cost increase on an I-81 CIP project.
Okay, and then my other question is, if I'm hearing that there's a lot of business and growth there, well, where are the proffers from this county to help fund some of these projects? And how did we not know that this was going to be needed in the reclassification process? Have we looked at, you know, those land use processes to see why this wasn't discussed at the land use process? To say, hey, you're going to need to extend some of this. You need to bring cash to the table. And, you know, I don't know if that's a discussion here, but.
Sure. Frederick County has provided $6.5 million. And again, as Secretary Donahue mentioned, the interchange access report is really what brought to light the operational issues at this location. And so that's what's driving the cost increase more than a missed estimate or other local factors.
So do we not require that federal process, whether it's the ISR or whatever it's called, or the OSAR, or any of these federal processes?
We do now.
We do now, in the smart scale process, but is there a way to say, hey, at the land use process, these need to be in there as well? Because if these are being caused by a lot of growth in the area, we have a way of dealing with that, and it's called the proffer process. But if this wasn't done at the rezoning process, then we totally missed all of that, and so maybe that's something to look at our internal policies at those land use programs.
So, Ms. Sellers, I'll jump in on this one because it's slightly outside of Ms. Pryor's area. So, you know, we have certain processes which by code and regulation involve us in land development. And so, you know, the one that I think would be most applicable to what you're discussing is the traffic impact analysis regulations. There are certain requirements in code, obviously expounded upon in regulation about the types of things that we look at there, but we do not have a direct role in like the proffer process and decision-making by those local governments. And so I think I may have said this before, but that was one of the first regulations one of the first things I ever did when I worked in state government in 2006. And the way I would describe the traffic impact analysis process is, and I'll give Richard Kaywood, if you're listening, credit for this, is it's like the nutritional label on the back of a bag of chips. We're telling you, if depending on how many chips you eat, what you might expect it will do to you, but we're not telling you how many chips to eat. And so that is kind of an informational process that is to be like used for folks as they go in their decision making, but ultimately under like the way the General Assembly has set up like the land development process, like the proffer thing is a wholly kind of local decision making process. Again, it can be informed by our traffic impact analysis regulations, and they can choose to say, oh, look at this, based on that I want to do X or Y, or they can look at it and say, thank you very much, I'd like to eat the whole bag of chips.
Right, and then there's the federal process, which is kind of my concern, is that, you know, in these land use decisions, you get the TIA, and how I've seen it played out at the local level is you read that, which can be thousands of pages of lots of numbers. that really just kind of go over your head. And then you'll get the highway there and they'll get through the whole process and they'll say, oh, by the way, you have to also do this report that'll come in with all of these new things that were never discussed at land use, the land use plan, and that somebody in local, especially on the local governing body, had no clue existed. And so it's trying to figure out how we make it to where these things are planned a little bit better, whether we choose to spend the money on this or not. And sounds like we probably do need to support it, but how do we improve those land use processes to make them make sense and to make them work? Because if we're having this process that the federal government is going to require along an interstate, and we know it's there, then it should be part of the land use discussion, in my opinion. And if, you know, the state government needs to now hold localities accountable and give them the wording to then go back to the applicant and say, your application is not complete because we haven't got through this process, you know. So that we're not coming in at the end and saying we need to put $9 million on this.
The good news is I think we're half the way to where you want to be. And so in the future, the application will require this. With regard to like the local process, again, I think that is a decision between local governments and the General Assembly. There were lots of discussions this session about how the development process works, and I expect there will be continued ones next session, which, to be direct, is me kind of saying, dodging the direct point of your issue, and saying that's, you know, a discussion for a different body at a different time, because that is all controlled by that legislative issue there. But we have changed our policy in terms of the federal reports that are required for the interchange modifications, and so we should not find ourselves in a position where we are surprised by something moving forward. Again, cannot speak to the proffer outcomes. Thank you, Ms. Pryor. Okay, board members, I'm going to ask your indulgence and explain something, and then I'm just looking for kind of a general groan or kind of concurrence that you are comfortable with what we are doing. So we have one other person who is here who is hoping to give a presentation today. We've talked with Mr. Cutler. What we can do is we might need to go a little past 12:15, but then we could leave later. So we're not going to compress the time you have to get lunch and to go change before the tours. But what we are going to be doing is probably compressing slightly some of the time on the tours. And so I'm just looking for some general comfort with that, or kind of an expression of otherwise, if you feel otherwise. All right, no one's giving me a bad face. Mr. Gregg, come on up. We are hoping to conclude at 12:15. Just saying that as you walk up, Mr. Gregg.
Mr. Secretary, it's a pleasure to be here between you and lunch.
Thank you, sir.
Today, we're going to give you a presentation. It's an informational type presentation about our traffic operations centers and safety service patrols. We operate these services under contract. These contracts have been in place for almost 10 years now, and we've run out of renewals. So we're going to this contract runs out in about March of next year. We're in the procurement phase now. This contract and the contract for some of our informational systems are some of the largest ones that we have. This last contract over the last 10 years has been approximately $500 million. So we want to give you insight into what goes on, the process we're going through now, and what you can expect over the next 12 months. About 12 months from now, we'll be back in front of you asking you to approve a contract for this. These traffic operations are really a core function within VDOT. You know, we've talked to you about maintenance. You hear about construction, you just did. We can have the smoothest pavements, the strongest bridges, best construction zones, but if we're not moving people and goods, we're not meeting the needs of the people of the Commonwealth. Our traffic operations program facilitates connecting seaports to major commercial hubs throughout the state, major international airports. This procurement of a new contract is an extended process. It takes a considerable amount of time. And again, it'll set the contract, when you approve it next year, it'll set a contract that'll be in place for approximately a decade. Again, this is one of the larger ones we do, and this procurement gives VDOT, this is an excellent opportunity for us to improve future services, the needs through updated technology, changing the performance metrics of some of these contracts and updating the incentives and disincentives to make them more fair and to make them better for both the vendor and for VDOT. These are some of the infrastructure that we use as far as traffic operations that the traffic operations centers control. You can see the Safety Service Patrol Operations Centers are the first two. However, we have a towing recovery program that we use up and down the interstate system. We also have towing programs that are specific to the tunnel operations. You see the ferry management that's on there. They also monitor our winter emergency services that we do during the winter and monitor that. Especially, one thing is very important, we've gotten much better at is the detour management when we have an incident on the interstate highways. Devices and technology, these are some of the technologies that the folks in the TOC manage as they manage the roadways. And you can see there what they are. Why do we have all these? We have all these to manage these type of situations.
Mr. Gregg, are these all from Virginia?
Yes, sir. They are all actual pictures.
I was really hoping that one on the bottom right wasn't, but okay.
Yes, sir. Unfortunately, they are.
Wow.
No, the middle one on the top's interesting too.
And it takes a joint team to do all this. You can see Mr. Cutler talked about the Peace Talk in Northern Virginia. That's the picture on the upper left-hand corner. Safety Service Patrol. The one on the top right is our incident management coordinators that we have put in place over the last 3 or 4 years. Of course, our state police partners, our emergency service partners, and our towing partners are all part of this, keeping our roadway clear and getting incidents cleared as quickly as possible. We've talked about some of these first bullets, but what I wanted to really stress here is that we've had some industry engagements so that we've had conversations with industry. This is what we're looking for. What can you provide? So that we've had that back and forth with industry. We've completed 4 peer exchanges with other DOTs specifically. You can see those that we have there. North Carolina is more similar to what we do. However, Georgia and Michigan have pretty robust type of incident management and TOC operations. And we conducted an ASTO survey that we got responses back from 30 other peer states that operate similar, either SSP, TOC, or both type of operations. So we're working through these contracting approaches to incorporate the information that we gain through these informational processes to put in these long-term, because it is a long-term contract that offers flexibility for us, flexibility for our service providers, and improves motorist safety and service performance, and that's the key there through better requirements. So our traffic operations centers, just for your information, here they are. We have five of them from the eastern region to Nova. The one that we have here, one in the central region is Richmond. Northwest region is located out of Stanton, and the southwest region locates out of Salem. These are the Safety Service Patrol routes in red. They cover about 86% of our interstate system, and a few miles on their primary limited access. We have a route or two on those as well. So that's the area that is currently covered by our SSP. So Ken Renard is our District Traffic Operations Director in the Hampton Roads area. He has stepped up and to be the champion of this procurement process that we're going through, and has managed the informational gathering that we've had with the industry, with other state agencies. He's got a team around him that's working together to put this procurement together, and he's going to tell you a little bit about the process that he's gone through doing that.
All right, afternoon, everyone. I just want to dive into a little bit on the services themselves. So Traffic Operations Center, what is it? Again, we have 5 TOCs out there. Those first 5 bullets there in orange are the core functions of what each one of those does. The traffic monitoring and the event management being the most important. Arterial management also, what happens on our primaries and our secondaries is important. How we interact with the cities. We've known for a long time now that what happens on city streets can impact interstates and vice versa. So it's important that we talk to those cities on a very regular basis. system monitoring. We have a lot of tools out there that we use to monitor our network, and this service operates all of those. Weather response, think snow, right? Huge on how we handle that throughout the year to make sure that we're being effective and efficient and have the right resources out there, and the TOC play a big role into that. And notifications, how we talk to each other. It's how we talk to each other when significant events happen, both internally and externally. 24/7, 365 coverage, 35,000 incidents a month. That's 1 to 2 every minute. That means since we started this meeting at 9 this morning, hundreds of incidents have happened on our roadways, right? We also have thousands of devices that are out there. Think of all the cameras, the signs, our signals. Our VA 511 system is extremely important to the state and the Commonwealth, and VA traffic as well. Again, it's a key role in the maintaining our situational awareness. All right, Safety Service Patrol, we are present in all 9 districts. Again, incident response is the first one there. So you can see in the top right, the SSP is likely the first one to the scene. They are setting that scene. They're putting the arrow boards up. They're taking the lanes. They're putting the cones down to set the scene so that when fire shows up and state police shows up, the scene is already set. They also help the fire and VSP as well all the way through the scene because it can change. Motorist assistance also very important. A large number of disabled vehicles, flat tires, running out of gas, vehicle breakdowns, all of those things are important to our motorists and keeping them safe. So having that white truck show up as they break down is extremely important, right? 28,000 incidents on our interstates is what they help service every month. We currently have a 21-minute average scene clearance time. We pay a lot of attention to that. Before this service existed, that number was obviously much higher. Every minute that we can shave off of that ends up a little over $1,300 per minute during peak hours, times 35,000 incidents per month. You can see that that adds up very, very quickly. So that average scene clearance time is huge to keeping Virginia moving. I set a large number of goals here when we first started. I wanted to make sure we rose the bar. I wanted to make sure that we were ready for 2030 and beyond. That's hard. Technology increases weekly, monthly, right? So trying to figure out what our TOC looks like in the future, we put a lot of thought and effort into to make sure we had flexibility there and we could grow as that technology grows. Interoperability, want to make sure traffic operations stays as a core function within VDOT. We also want to make sure we're standardized. What happens in the western part of the state should also be very similar to the eastern part of the state as we address these issues. Multiple partners is important. We want to make sure that we're partnering with as many folks out there as we can. Improving the performance metrics, the KPIs, that improves motorist safety. I want to detect those incidents faster. I want to be more accurate in our first reports that are out there. I want to be able to support those express lanes that are coming up, right? Innovation and growth, we've touched on that a little bit. We've talked about AI here as well. It can be a great tool. Finding those incidents faster on our network, dispatching resources faster using AI is a real possibility, and we want to be able to exploit that. We want to be able to automate as much as we can, and we want to be as safe as we can. Then lastly, fostering our partnerships, right? Working with VSP, VDEM, all the rest of the first responders that are out there, our localities, and the tow community, again, extremely important. The cost in 2018 when this current contract was in service for both services, you can see it was just under $34 million. We've grown over the last 9 years, currently around 57 or just over 57 million. The bulk of that has been labor rate increases, also CPI increases. We've also added some additional routes, safety service patrol routes, especially in those hot spots and in those express lanes as well. We currently think the estimate right now is 65 to 75 per year, and I'll have more information once we've been able to advertise and talk to the different partners that are out there. little bit about the schedule on the last slide. So we've, as Mr. Gregg talked about, we've been talking to industry for some time now, right? We know who those partners are, both old and the new up-and-comers. So we wanted to make sure we reached out to them, got their ideas. How do we take risk off them? How do we take risk off of us to be able to partner together and effectively manage and tackle this situation? We've done that. Our peers in the DOT communities as well are also extremely important. Who's got the better ideas? Who's doing the things that are innovative out there? We want to capture that and make sure that we're doing the same things, right? So we're currently in the RFP phase. I do hope to go to advertisement in August of this year, and we do hope to award in August and September of next year. And there is a planned CTB update, again, prior going to award. So that is, in a nutshell, what those two services are. I'll take any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Mr. Folks?
I'm just curious as to the length of the contract, a 10-year contract in this environment with things changing so rapidly, how it's equitable from either the standpoint of the Commonwealth or the vendor, and how they could price it to be fair to both sides. Or are there outs? Are there escalators? I'm sure there are escalators, and
Yes,
you
sir.
mentioned the PPI and things like that, but
Right.
it just seems to me that's an extraordinarily long contract for something of this magnitude.
Yes, sir. There are multiple option years built in. There is price escalation that is built into this as well to make sure, again, that we're taking risk off both sides as we go through this. But what we found in the current contract is 10 years as well, and that's been a great partnership, as we move forward. So that's something we're looking at doing in the future as well.
Mr. Secretary, if I might, Mr. Folks and the rest of the board, I think what was not explained here, but Mr. Renard put there, the overall length of a contract would be their 5-year base year plus the option to renew for subsequent years to be able to get to a 10-year contract. So it's not a 10-year contract, but can you go back to slide 14, Ken? So slide 14 really represents the goals and objectives that this contract is trying to achieve, recognizing, Mr. Folks, what you put forward was that the ever-changing environment that we have. How do we adapt? And this is specific to our Traffic Operations Center control room activities. It's not the software. It's for the labor to be I'll term it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Renard, that it's more of the butts in the seats. The Safety Service Patrol side of this is providing the vehicles themselves, the employees, the training, the supervisors, and so on and so forth. All of that takes a long-term investment by the contractor to come in and still needs to be able to recover the cost and be able to change dynamically with the contract. So this is one where we've experienced some innovation that came to fruition. We've experienced a time period where labor costs have gone up and there's been friction there. We've added rates. Truck values have gone up that I'm going to show you next that were not consumed in the original contract. So there are flexibilities that we are working with the community to be able to make sure that risks are better balanced there. But a long-term contract or a base year contract with the option for renewals is very important to be able to make sure that we don't front-end load a particular contract, that there's a balance. As long as they're performing well, there should be no reason to be able to take it further. So these are some significant changes to what we want to accomplish, recognizing, as Mr. Renard said, how do we detect the incidents faster, deploy the resources, and clear the road faster? There could be a combination of things that occur that we need that flexibility here. So the reason why we're presenting it to you today is this is a year-long investment. You will likely be contacted during the procurement to be asked some questions about this. If it's a 10-year contract and we use the upper end of the estimate, that's a $750 million contract. So the current one has been in place for coming up on 10 years. It was one of the first ones that I signed coming into the position. It is a sizable contract that I want to make sure that you have line of sight of, one, the importance that it serves, and then the two, the value that it achieves for the citizens of the Commonwealth.
We also are hoping for some competitive tension, so we're not at the high end, but just, that's a hope. Just wanted to say that part out loud. Ms. Sellers.
Is this one vendor or I mean, these are very different things.
Yeah, I think that, and our current contract is one vendor. They have the SSP and the TOC together. Our intention on this is that there would be competition, that we would split them out so that the TOC would be separate and from the SSP. Back to the commissioner's point, I believe that Mr. Renard is looking at the TOC initial contract would be 4 years, and the initial SSP contract would be 5 for the specific reason that the commissioner said. Mr. Renard has been working very closely with another 5-year for the SSP, so that integration between technology and butts in the seat is going to be very important for us on the TOC side.
So maybe, Mr. Gregg, if we can expand on, it's going to be one solicitation.
Correct.
That will be a solicitation that includes an SSP entity and a TOC. So one firm can bid on a TOC and not an SSP, or vice versa, or they could bid on both.
Correct, yes, sir.
Very complicated. Good.
We don't do anything easy.
I might phrase that slightly different. So many meaningful things are difficult to do right. And I think a lesson that the department has learned is that providing some flexibility here and optionality, we hope can drive greater competition and hopefully some better results in that procurement. And it may be that we get one firm that wants to do both, but there may be one firm that's better at SSP and a different one that's better at TOC. And the way this contract has been structured in the past, we wouldn't have been able to get to that level of nuance here. And so, the good thing about the department is they do complicated things well. Like we drive over a lot of difficult bridges, luckily they don't let me touch them, right? Because that would be bad. But we can handle this. We do A+B contracting on the construction side. This is something they have a lot of experience with. It is complicated, but it is something they can do, and I have full confidence in their ability to drive it. I think the other important thing I really would encourage the board to think about is this is operations. We spend a lot of time talking about construction. Operations is really, really, really important for how our roadways work. It's, a lot of the stuff we've done in the 81 corridor that we have effect today is really the operations. So the TRIP program for towing those heavy trucks and getting them out of the roadway, it's delivered real benefits. Compared to adding a new lane, it's really cheap. Compared to doing nothing, it's also cheap in a different way, right? Because we saw those costs of what each minute, the impact that has to, those on the roadway there. And so, I just think we're going to be having more and more discussions about operations, also as we continue to talk about the Interstate Operations and Enhancement Program. The Assembly put operations before enhancement in the title of that program. I think that was on purpose. And so, we just have to think more and more about how do we make our existing system work better, and operations is a big part of that. It's something I think the department has been a leader in, but I still think there's more opportunity for us to look at what else we can do there. So to me, this is the first of many discussions I think we'll be having on the operations side.
Secretary.
Yes, sir, Dr. Smoot.
First, I want to express appreciation for the good work that has occurred in clearing accident sites, in particular the towing aspect of that. You no longer have to wait for 5 hours for the guy who went down on the river to go fishing to come and get the tow truck and, get on the interstate or whatever. You solved that problem. Good work. And the work of the safety patrols, I think, is an outward view of our whole organization to people who are usually in a near desperate situation out there. So good work with that one. Now, am I right or wrong, based on what you have said, that most of the people who work in these traffic operation centers and the safety patrol are not VDOT employees?
That's correct.
They work for these companies you're talking about. Okay, so they're not our employees, although
It's a partnership.
yeah, certainly the ones in the safety patrol are generally perceived by the people they're helping, I think, as being VDOT
And that's
people.
on purpose.
Yeah. But I have one concern, and I just want to leave it with you as you work through this. I went and spent some time at the Traffic Operations Center, and I came away from that thinking, boy, this really looks great. But I really am skeptical that it's having a lot of impact on our operations. I mean, it was an impressive scene. You know, I mean, I thought, you know, like watching the, you know, invasion of Normandy or something, you know, from up in a blimp. And, but, you know, the operations involve not only our people, but localities, roads that generally we're not responsible for. Because when everybody starts getting off the interstate, you know, it could be a terrible situation, but they're generally on roads that we don't do a whole lot with. And I think this whole Traffic Operations Center thing needs a very critical review from you all, not from us, from you all. And maybe it's doing great, and maybe I and others have unreal expectations of what they really can do. But as the commissioner knows, I am fortunately still married to the same woman that I spent 11 and a half hours with sitting on I-81 in a snowstorm 10 years ago. And I saw no impact. I dialed 511, and I might as well have been calling the North Pole or somewhere. There were no message board things. And finally I picked up a local AM radio station that gave me more information about my situation sitting there for 11 and a half hours on I-81 in a snowstorm that I got nothing from VDOT. Nothing.
Mr. Secretary.
I would just say, Dr. Schmidt, you certainly have a way of painting a picture with words. I'm going to let the commissioner
Let me date myself back into the beginning of this then to suggest that traffic operations has evolved significantly over the last 10 years, 9 to 10 years, from a standpoint of, and I'll paint a picture during the early Northam administration that we had the Potomac Mills sign that was about to fall on Interstate 95 due to high winds, and we had to shut down the general purpose lanes, coordinated with our partner in Transurban to be able to provide relief in the southbound direction on a Friday, and nothing good ever happens on a Friday at 4:45 p.m. During that same time period, we had Interstate 64 where a power line fell across the interstate outside of Goochland, Charlottesville area, caught the neighboring fields on fire, and we were diverting traffic. What we quickly learned at that time was that we could divert people very well off the interstate, but didn't coordinate so well inside of the agency to be able to retime the signals, even though that we had signals pre-timed to be able to handle a diversion. Now, it is like muscle memory. We have an incident on the interstate. We think how long it's going to take, and we're having the TOC and the signal system integrated to the point where we're changing the signals in real time to handle the demand. We have changed our internal organizational structure where we have the equivalent of Mr. Renard in all 9 districts to be able to address this situation. We have coordinated and collapsed our traffic operations or our traffic engineering division and our ITS group in the central office into one division so that we have a seamless organization of subject matter experts that are focused on travel, regardless of whether it's on the interstate system or our primary system. We are working with our localities right now to generate memorandums of agreement where we have signal systems that we can operate should we need to divert traffic under certain conditions. I will say that there's been many after-action reports, especially during snowstorms. I might add the one that you were in, as well as the 2012 22, January 3rd snowstorm, about communicating before incidents, during an incident, and post cleanup that has occurred quite drastically. So this is evolutionary. We continue to lead the organization. I hear you that we can be better. We are striving to be better. Part of this is certainly, this slide I think says it all, is that we are growing. We are making sure that we're changing our environment. Your example of being in the TOC and multiple cameras monitoring it, part of the artificial intelligence that we want to build is to be able to use those camera feeds that are all coming in across the state and be able to detect them using AI and other technology to be able to address that to the operator. I will remind the board that you adopted a project that's a pilot project on Interstate 95 in January of this year to use that type of technology and test it out to be able to be in a place where we can detect risky driving behavior in advance of things. So we continue to evolve, look at it, create that muscle memory that I spoke of earlier. We've expanded SSP routes that did not exist before Mr. Smoot or Dr. Smoot on Interstate 81 because we didn't have an interstate operations and enhancement program to be able to help support the expansion of the system and the monies to be able to build out our operations program. I'd also note along Interstate 81, part of the IOEP that we did, we first looked at the operations program, which was SSPs, variable message signs, cameras to be able to help detect incidents, as well as looking at the arterial system of where we're going to put traffic and putting in traffic signals, changing radii of curbs to be able to help mitigate and be able to take a diversionary alternative route to create resiliency in our network. So I would say over the last 10 years, we have done a lot. This procurement is another step to starting it. And I might add, I think in the July timeframe or June or July timeframe, we're going to come back and have another conversation on another upcoming procurement, which is called Project Vista, which is going to look at our traffic operations center software package and all the disparate systems that we have, and looking at it to create a federated network or an integrated network of all of our systems, whether it be TOC, 511, our signal system, and seeing how we can integrate all of that into the next generation of our operations program. Mr. Gregg started this conversation off with something that I started 9 years ago. We were looking at the pavement performance measures and our bridge performance measures. The best bridges, if we're striving to be 100% sufficient, best pavements, but we're not moving the people, just like you sat in that snowstorm without information, we're not meeting the needs of the public. So in my view is, this is an exciting time for operations. We're going to start here with traffic operations centers, the men and women that support it, and the men and women that support the agency in the safety service patrols that frankly put their life on the line every single day to help those stranded motorists and be the first responders in many cases, supporting our state police and fire and rescue to be able to provide the traffic control that's necessary for safe and efficient movement of people and goods.
I'd also add to that we're now able, in a snowstorm or any type of event, like you talked about on 81, like the Commissioner talked about on 95, to geofence that area and to directly communicate with those folks that are in the car. We were not in a position to do that back then, but we are now, so we can have that communication and let folks know via cell phone what's going on, what they can expect. So that technology has advanced, and we have that capability now so that we can use that. So I'm pretty excited. I hope you heard the passion of the Commissioner, because that's pretty important, and I think that passion is filtered down through our organization, and that muscle memory and those alternatives. Roanoke is a good example. We have partnership with Roanoke where when we push people off on 460 or 11, we can control those signals so that we can make sure that the traffic flows, just like we do in some of the Hampton Roads communities as well already. We're working on others up and down the 81 corridor to do the same thing, so that when we push people off, we're not pushing them off to just another roadblock somewhere. So.
Right, Mr. Gribben?
Believe it or not, I actually have a whole series of questions. But before I launch the questions, I want to just, I'm not sure this is the best time since giving the
I was
time
gonna make the
for
note.
run through that. So can we revisit this?
I think, Mr. Gregg, will you be here tomorrow?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm going to hold all my questions and we can wrap this up now and we'll talk about it tomorrow. That's okay with you,
Spectacular.
Mr.
And,
Secretary.
So just noting at the time, so guys, it's 12:30, lunch is across the hall. For members of the public, we are suspending this meeting until tomorrow. We are going to reconvene at 11 a.m. We're going to start with the action agenda. All we'll be doing at the action agenda at 11 is taking public comment. We will then reconvene the workshop meeting. We have 4 presentations. 2 are very fast. One is from WMATA, and the other is the commissioner giving you a second update on pavements and bridges, at which point we will then move into the action meeting. So really appreciate, everyone's time today. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow, and I'm suspending today's workshop meeting.